They always say good things come to those who wait, but nobody ever warns you. Sometimes the reward doesn't just change your life. It destroys everything you thought you knew about it. A broke single father, a crumbling old house, a hidden trunk buried under decades of dust and silence. And somewhere inside that trunk, a secret worth millions that powerful men had spent years trying to make sure nobody ever found. When Liam Carter climbed into that attic on a Tuesday morning, he wasn't looking for anything except a leaking pipe. He found something that would turn his entire world upside down. If you've ever been laughed at for doing the right thing, this story is for you. Stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The ladder wobbled. It was the third time in 20 minutes, and Liam Carter had stopped flinching. He'd learned long ago that a wobbling ladder on a job site was just the universe's way of reminding you that nothing in this line of work was ever truly stable. He shifted his weight, pressed one boot flat against the attic floor joist, and reached up to press his palm against the underside of the roof decking. The wood was soft. Not just damp. Soft, the way wood gets when water has been living inside it for years without anyone noticing. He exhaled slowly through his nose. "Mrs. Harper," he called down. A pause, then the shuffle of slippered feet across old hardwood floors. "Yes, dear?" "How long has that back bedroom ceiling been stained?" Another pause. Longer, this time. "Oh," Evelyn Harper said, in that particular tone of voice that people use when they've been quietly pretending something isn't as bad as it looks. "A few years, maybe. I just kept putting a pot under it when it rained." Liam pressed his palm harder against the decking. His fingers sank in slightly. He pulled them back and looked at the dark imprint they left. A few years. He sat back on his heels and looked around the attic. It was the kind of space that told you a lot about the person who owned the house. Organized once. Cardboard boxes labeled in neat handwriting. Christmas, Thomas's papers, kitchen extra. A wooden rocking chair pushed into the corner with a folded quilt draped over it. A ceramic lamp without a shade. Everything dusty, yes, but arranged with care. Someone had loved this house. Someone had taken pride in it once, and then slowly, the way it always happens, life had made the maintenance impossible to keep up with. Liam had seen it 100 times. Cedar Ridge was full of houses like this, full of people like Evelyn Harper, elderly, alone, living on fixed incomes that barely covered the basics, watching their homes deteriorate around them one cracked pipe and one soft rafter at a time. He climbed back down the ladder carefully. Evelyn was waiting at the bottom, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she'd made for him an hour ago. It had long gone cold, but she was still holding it like an offering. Liam pulled off his work gloves and tucked them into the back pocket of his jeans. He was 32 years old, lean and dark-haired, with the kind of hands that told you exactly what he did for a living. Calloused palms, permanently grease-stained knuckles, a small scar across his left thumb from a saw blade he'd gotten too comfortable around 4 years ago. His face was the kind that looked older than 32 in the lines around his eyes, and younger than 32 when he smiled. He wasn't smiling right now. "Mrs. Harper," he said carefully, "that roof isn't just leaking. The decking up there is rotted through in at least 3 places. The rafters on the north side have water damage going back. I'd guess at least 5, 6 years. Maybe longer." Evelyn's face didn't change much. She just looked at him steadily over the rim of her tea mug with those pale gray eyes that had seen 81 years of life and weren't easily rattled by bad news. "Is it dangerous?" she asked. "Yeah," Liam said. "It is. If we get a heavy snow this winter, or even a serious rainstorm, there's a real chance that section over the back bedroom comes down." Silence. Outside, through the kitchen window, a crow landed on the fence post and sat there looking important. "Well," Evelyn said finally, in a quiet voice, "I suppose I'll have to think about what to do." They both knew what that meant. "I don't have the money." It was the sentence that hid behind those words like a ghost, present in the room but unspoken, because some people, especially people of Evelyn's generation, would rather let their roof fall in than say out loud that they couldn't afford to fix it. Liam had known Evelyn Harper his entire life. She'd been his mother's neighbor for 20 years before his mother passed. She used to leave bags of vegetables from her garden on their porch during the summer. Zucchini, tomatoes, the occasional overgrown cucumber. She'd come to his mother's funeral. She'd sent his son Noah a birthday card every single year since Noah was born, $5 tucked inside. The same amount every year because she didn't realize how quickly kids grew or how quickly $5 stopped meaning what it used to. He picked up the cold mug of tea from her hands and set it on the kitchen counter. "I'll fix it," he said. Evelyn looked at him. "Liam, I've got some reclaimed decking at the shop I've been meaning to use. The labor's not a big deal, couple of weekends." "I can't pay you," she said, and her voice was very quiet and very dignified when she said it. The dignity of someone who had never in her life asked for charity and wasn't about to start now. "I know," Liam said. "I'm not asking you to." He told his son about it that evening over dinner. Noah was 13, all sharp elbows and oversized opinions, currently going through a phase where he communicated primarily through sighs and skeptical eyebrow raises. But he was also, underneath all of that, a genuinely good kid. The kind of good that comes not from being told to behave, but from having watched someone try to do right their whole life. "So you're just going to do it for free?" Noah said, stabbing a piece of broccoli. "Yep. Even though Dalton's been calling you about his rental property for like 2 months. Dalton pays fine. Mrs. Harper's roof is falling in." Noah considered this. Dalton's going to be mad. Dalton's always mad about something. Noah put the broccoli in his mouth, chewed, swallowed, looked at his father sideways. "Marcus at school says his dad thinks you're bad at business." Liam looked up from his plate. "What does Marcus's dad do?" he asked. "Sells insurance." Then Marcus's dad has a different idea of what good business looks like. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, in the careful voice he used when he was working something out, "But we don't have a ton of money either, Dad. Are we going to be okay?" Liam set his fork down. He looked at his son. At this kid he'd been raising alone for the past 9 years, since Noah's mother had decided that life in Cedar Ridge with a handyman wasn't what she'd signed up for. He looked at him and felt the complicated weight of that question, because it wasn't a simple question. It never was. "We're fine," he said. "We're not rich, but we're fine. And Mrs. Harper's been alone in that house for 6 years since Mr. Harper died. If that roof falls in on her in January, it won't matter how much money we have. You understand?" Noah looked at his plate. A beat. "Yeah," he said. "I get it." "Good." They ate in silence for a moment. "Can I come help on Saturday?" Noah asked. Liam looked up, surprised. "Yeah," he said. "You can come help." Cedar Ridge was the kind of small town that had a long memory and a short attention span. People noticed things quickly and talked about them immediately, but the talking rarely lasted more than a few days before something else came along to occupy the conversation. So when word got around that Liam Carter was spending his Saturdays fixing up old Evelyn Harper's place for nothing, the town's reaction was predictably split. Some people, mostly the older residents, the ones who remembered when neighbors helped neighbors without anyone making a big deal about it, quietly approved. Margaret Dutton from the flower shop asked Liam one morning how it was going, and then went home and baked Evelyn a casserole. Old Pete Vasquez from the hardware store gave Liam a 15% discount on supplies without being asked. Others had more complicated feelings about it. "You know she's got a son somewhere out west," said Danny Briggs, leaning against the counter at Heller's Diner one Friday morning. Danny was 38, worked in construction, and considered himself something of an authority on local real estate matters. "Her son ought to be the one handling this, not some—" "Her son hasn't been back in 4 years," said the woman behind the counter, whose name was Rita, and who had worked at Heller's for 11 years and considered herself an authority on most things. "Merry Christmas card once a year. You gonna lecture Liam Carter about family responsibility?" Danny retreated into his coffee, but it wasn't just mild skepticism. There were people in town, a particular subset of people who organized their worldview around profit margins and practical outcomes, who found Liam's decision actively irritating. Not because they disliked him, but because his choices were, in some hard-to-articulate way, a rebuke to how they decided to live. "He's got a 13-year-old to feed," said a man named Victor Hale one evening in the back booth at Donnelly's bar, speaking to nobody in particular in the way that people speak when they actually want everyone to hear them. And he's spending his weekends playing handyman for charity. It's not admirable. It's irresponsible. Victor Hale was 51 years old and built like a man who had once been athletic and now expressed that energy through forceful opinions and expensive watches. He was the biggest real estate developer in a 60-mile radius of Cedar Ridge, and he had a way of entering rooms that made it clear he expected them to reorganize around him. People mostly obliged. He had been watching the Harper property for 2 years. It was a large lot, nearly 4 acres, on the northeast edge of town, where Cedar Ridge's quiet residential streets gave way to open land that would, in the hands of the right developer, become something very profitable. Evelyn Harper was 81 and frail and entirely alone. The property taxes were becoming difficult. Victor had done his research. He didn't like Liam Carter coming in and complicating things. The second Saturday, Noah came. He showed up in the truck at 8 in the morning wearing work boots that were slightly too big for him and carrying a thermos of coffee he'd made himself, which tasted like hot brown water with ambitions. Liam drank it without comment. They worked on the roof for most of the morning, tearing off the damaged decking, assessing the rafters, marking what needed to be replaced. Noah was actually useful in the clumsy, enthusiastic way of 13-year-olds who are trying hard. He handed Liam tools without being asked, and only dropped the hammer once. Evelyn came out at noon with sandwiches she'd made from what Liam suspected was everything she had in her refrigerator. Turkey and mustard on white bread with the crust cut off, a habit she'd probably maintained for 60 years without questioning why. "You didn't have to do this," Liam said. "I'm not completely helpless," Evelyn said, with some edge in it. Then, softer, "Let me do what I can do." They sat on the porch steps and ate. Evelyn sat in her chair just inside the screen door, close enough to be part of the conversation, but not joining them on the steps, which was a very Evelyn Harper way of being sociable. "Your boy has your eyes," she said to Liam. Noah looked uncomfortable in the way that teenagers always do when adults talk about what they look like, as though being observed is a minor violation. "He's got his own eyes," Liam said. "He has your stubborn look," Evelyn said. "When you were about his age, you used to ride your bicycle past this house every afternoon. Every single afternoon, same time, like you were on a schedule. I always wondered where you were going." Liam thought about it. "Probably nowhere," he said honestly. Evelyn smiled. There was something in her smile that afternoon, something a little tired, a little private, that Liam couldn't quite read. Yeah, it was during the third visit that Liam found the trunk. He'd gone up into the attic alone that morning. Noah had a school project due Monday and had stayed home, and it was just Liam in the quiet of the old house and the particular smell of old wood and forgotten things that old attics always had. He was moving boxes to get to a section of the floor he needed to inspect when he saw it. It was pushed all the way to the back, under the eaves, half covered by an old canvas tarpaulin that had faded from green to something closer to gray. A steamer trunk, the old-fashioned kind, with brass hardware and a domed lid, the kind that people used to take on ocean voyages in the 1950s. The leather straps were cracked and dry. The brass clasps were tarnished dark. Liam moved the tarpaulin aside and crouched in front of it. He wasn't thinking anything in particular when he opened it. He was looking for structural problems, not treasure. He'd opened 100 old trunks in 100 old attics over the years, and found mostly the same things: old clothes, old photographs, old letters, the physical residue of lives being slowly packed away and forgotten. But when the lid opened and he looked inside, something made him go very still. It wasn't that any single thing looked obviously important, it was the organization of it. The way everything had been placed, not thrown in carelessly, the way people store things they expect to retrieve someday, but arranged with deliberate, careful intention. The way someone arranges things they want a specific person to find. On the very top was a sealed envelope with a name written on it in a firm, old-fashioned hand. Not Evelyn's name, not any name Liam recognized. He sat back on his heels and looked at it for a long moment. The attic was very quiet. Dust moved slowly in the thin light coming through the vent at the gable end. He didn't open the envelope. He put the lid carefully back down, stood up, and went to find Evelyn. But she was in the kitchen when he came down, standing at the counter with her back to the door, doing something with the coffee pot. She moved slowly these days. She'd broken her hip 2 years ago, and the recovery had taken something out of her that hadn't entirely come back. But she moved with precision, the way people do when they've spent a lifetime in a particular kitchen and know exactly where everything is. "Mrs. Harper," Liam said. She turned, saw his face. "What's wrong?" she said immediately. "Nothing's wrong. I found something in the attic. A trunk. Big one. Under a tarp in the back corner. Did you know it was there?" Evelyn looked at him. A very long pause. "Yes," she said. "The one with the brass hardware? Leather straps?" "Yes." Her voice was quieter now. "Thomas put it there. My husband." She turned back to the coffee pot. "A long time ago." "There's an envelope on top, with a name written on it." Liam hesitated. "Is it something you want to deal with? You don't have to—" "What name?" Evelyn said, still with her back to him. Liam had memorized it without meaning to. "Scarlett," he said. "Scarlett Monroe." The coffee pot made a quiet gurgling sound. Evelyn's shoulders went very still. "Monroe was my maiden name," she said, after a moment. "Scarlett is my daughter." Liam waited. Evelyn turned around. Her face was composed, but something behind her eyes was working through something complicated, the way you watch someone do math in their head. "My daughter and I haven't spoken properly in a long time," she said. "She lives in New York. She runs a small pause, the kind that contains entire sentences. She does very well for herself." "Should I call someone? Is there a family I can—" "No," Evelyn said quietly. "Leave it for now. Leave it where it is." She looked at him steadily. "Please." Liam nodded. He didn't ask anything else. He went back upstairs, covered the trunk with the tarpaulin, and spent the next 3 hours replacing damaged rafters, and didn't think about it, or tried not to. The thing about Cedar Ridge was that Victor Hale's name came up everywhere once you started paying attention. Liam had always been vaguely aware of him. The development projects, the name on signs at the edge of new subdivisions, the general sense of a man who was always in the process of acquiring something. But it wasn't until Rita at Heller's mentioned, casually, that Victor had been asking around about Evelyn Harper's property that Liam started paying closer attention. "Asking how?" Liam said. Rita shrugged, refilling his coffee without being asked. "Asking who she talks to, whether she has family nearby, whether she's thought about selling." Rita paused. "Someone told him she hadn't paid her property taxes fully last year. I don't know how he found that out." Liam looked at his coffee. "He's circling," he said. "Seems like it." He thought about Evelyn's face when he'd mentioned the trunk, that careful, contained stillness. 81 years old, alone, a hip that hadn't healed right, a roof that had been falling apart for years. The kind of situation that looked, from the outside, like someone who was ready to be helped, and could be quietly redirected into a decision that wasn't really their own. He left a bigger tip than usual and drove to Evelyn's. She was in the garden when he arrived, which surprised him. So it was cold enough for her breath to show, kneeling beside the dead stalks of what had been a flower bed, pulling up bulbs to store for winter. She looked up when she heard his truck. "You're not scheduled today," she said. "I know. I wanted to check on a few things." He got out of the truck and walked over to her. "Here, let me—" "I'm fine," she said, with that particular Evelyn firmness. "I'm not made of glass." He crouched beside her anyway, not to help, but just to be at the same level. "Someone's been asking around town about your property. Victor Hale, you know who he is?" Evelyn kept working, pulling bulbs free from the hard soil. "He's come to the house twice," she said. Liam looked at her. "He's been here?" "With papers, some kind of offer." She set a bulb in the basket beside her. "He's very polished, very friendly. Keeps telling me how hard it must be living alone, maintaining all of this." A pause. "Which is true, of course. It is hard." "What does the offer say?" "I didn't read it carefully. He left it. It's on the kitchen table." Liam stood up. "Can I look at it?" Evelyn considered him for a moment. Then she nodded. He read it twice standing at the kitchen table, and his stomach dropped on the second read. The headline number, the purchase price, looked reasonable at first glance. Not generous, but reasonable. The kind of number that would seem fair to someone who didn't know property values well, which Victor had clearly counted on. But below the headline, in paragraphs 4 through 8 of the 22-page document, were the things that mattered. A clause stating that the sale included all structures on the property and all contents therein, effectively signing away everything inside the house, every piece of furniture, every box, every item in the attic, along with the land. A clause giving Victor's company the right to take possession within 30 days of signing, with an accelerated timeline that would leave Evelyn almost no time to make alternative arrangements. A clause, and this was the one that made Liam read the paragraph 3 times to make sure he was understanding it correctly, that allowed Victor Hale's company to claim a portion of any assets discovered on the property after the date of sale, with no cap on the value of those assets. He set the papers down. He stood very still in Evelyn Harper's kitchen for a long moment, looking out the window at her in the garden, pulling bulbs from the frozen ground with her bare hands. Then he picked the papers up again, folded them carefully, and put them back exactly where he'd found them. When Evelyn came inside, stamping dirt from her shoes at the back door, Liam was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee he'd made. She looked at him. She'd been reading people her whole life. "It's bad," she said. It wasn't a question. "It's not good," Liam said. "Sit down." She sat. He talked her through it carefully, not in legal language, just plainly, the way you explain something important to someone who deserves to understand what they're dealing with. He didn't editorialize. He didn't tell her what to do. He just told her what it said. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. "He seems so helpful," Evelyn said. "Yeah," Liam said. "People like that usually do." "What do I do?" "First thing, don't sign anything. Second thing, you need someone to look at this properly. A real estate attorney." He hesitated. "Do you have one?" "Thomas handled all of that." A beat. "Thomas has been gone 6 years. "Okay, I know someone in Millfield. She's good. She'll do a consultation for free." Evelyn looked at her coffee. "And the trunk?" she said quietly. Liam looked at her. "The trunk might matter," he said carefully. "I don't know how yet, but you should think about whether there's someone who ought to know about it." Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Outside, the crow was back on the fence post. Or maybe it was a different crow. It was hard to tell. "I'll think about it," she said finally. That night, after Noah was asleep, Liam sat at the kitchen table in his own house and did something he rarely allowed himself to do. He let himself feel the weight of everything. The roof repairs were going to take 2 more weekends, minimum. He had a legitimate job waiting, Dalton's rental property, which was actually in worse shape than he'd let on, and which would pay enough to cover December's bills if he got to it this week. He was behind on the truck payment, not dangerously behind, but behind. And none of that was the thing that was sitting heavy on him. The thing that was heavy was simpler and harder to explain. It was the look on Evelyn's face when she said he seemed so helpful. The trust in that. The way someone who had been managing a loan for 6 years could still be surprised by the possibility that someone was trying to take advantage of her. He picked up his phone and put it back down. He thought about the trunk, the sealed envelope with a name on it. Scarlett Monroe. Somewhere in New York, a woman who hadn't spoken to her mother in a long time had no idea that her father had left something in a trunk in an attic in Cedar Ridge, waiting. Waiting for what, exactly, Liam didn't know. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. The 4th Saturday, it rained. Liam worked anyway, covered in a waterproof tarp he'd rigged up over the damaged section, working methodically through the sound of rain on new decking. Noah had come again and was sitting inside the attic hatch doorway, technically out of the rain but close enough to hand Liam tools when needed, and had been uncharacteristically quiet all morning. "What's going on with you?" Liam said eventually. "Nothing." "Try again." A pause. The rain got heavier for a moment and then settled back. "Marcus's dad told Marcus that you're going to end up broke because you don't know how to run a business, Noah said, and that Mrs. Harper's probably going to sell to Mr. Hale anyway, so it's all pointless. Liam kept working. What do you think? He asked. I think Marcus's dad is kind of an asshole, Noah said. Language. Sorry. But you're wondering if he's right. Silence. Maybe a little, Noah admitted. Liam sat back on his heels. The rain drummed on the tarp. He looked at the newly replaced decking. Solid, clean, properly installed. The kind of work that would last 20 years if someone kept up with it. You know what this roof will do this winter? He said. Not leak? Not leak, which means Mrs. Harper sleeps dry, which means she doesn't develop mold in her walls, which means she doesn't get sick from it, which means... He stopped. I'm not going to draw you a diagram. The point is that it matters. Even if nobody ever knows we did it. Even if she sells to Hale anyway. He picked up the hammer. The work matters. You hear me? Noah was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. I hear you. They worked until the rain stopped. The call came on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks into the project. Liam was in his truck in the parking lot of the grocery store, engine running, waiting for Noah to stop taking his time inside, when his phone rang. An unknown number. New York area code. He almost didn't answer it. Is this Liam Carter? Said a woman's voice, clipped, precise, the voice of someone who made a lot of phone calls and didn't waste time on them. Yeah, Liam said. My name is Scarlett Monroe. My mother is Evelyn Harper. I understand you've been doing repair work on her house. Liam said nothing for a moment. I have, he said carefully. I'd like to talk to you about that. A pause. And about a few other things. Outside the grocery store, Noah emerged through the automatic doors carrying 2 bags and looking extremely annoyed about something, in the way that teenagers always look extremely annoyed about things that have nothing to do with anything. Liam watched him walk toward the truck. Yeah, he said into the phone. We should talk. He'd known this phone call was coming. He hadn't known what it would feel like when it arrived. What it felt like, if he was being honest with himself, was the feeling you get when you've been walking in the dark for a long time and someone turns on a light, and you realize, for the first time, that you've been in a much larger room than you thought. Scarlett Monroe's voice on the phone had been precise and controlled. The voice of someone who had learned, probably young, that letting people hear too much of what you were actually feeling was a form of vulnerability you couldn't afford. Liam had recognized that quality immediately, not because he was particularly perceptive about people, but because he'd heard it before. In clients who owed him money and were embarrassed about it. In his ex-wife, near the end, when she'd already made her decision but hadn't said it out loud yet. In himself occasionally, on the phone with bill collectors. It was the voice of someone holding something carefully, the way you hold a glass that's already cracked. She'd asked him to meet her in person, not at Evelyn's house. She'd been specific about that. She'd said she wasn't ready to see her mother yet, which was the most honest thing she said in the entire conversation, and possibly the most surprising. They met at the only coffee shop in Cedar Ridge that wasn't also a diner, a narrow place on Merchant Street called Grounds, that had been there for about 6 years and survived on the loyalty of roughly 40 regular customers who came in every morning and ordered the same thing every time. At 9 in the morning on a Thursday, it was quiet enough that Liam could hear the espresso machine from the parking lot. He got there first. He didn't know why that mattered to him, but it did. Scarlett Monroe walked in at 8 minutes past 9, which told him she was the kind of person who was usually early and had deliberately made herself late so she wouldn't be caught waiting. She was 30 years old, tall, dressed in clothes that were expensive in the way that expensive clothes look when someone buys them to last rather than to impress. Dark gray coat, plain black sweater, dark trousers. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a way that suggested she'd done it quickly and without a mirror. She looked like someone who had driven through the night and was operating on the particular fuel of anxiety and black coffee. She looked, in a way that Liam wasn't expecting, like Evelyn. Something around the jaw, the gray eyes. She sat down across from him without the small social performance most people do when they first meet someone. No extended hand, no bright smile, no comment about the weather. She set her phone face down on the table and looked at him directly. "You're younger than I expected," she said. "You're something I didn't know what to expect," Liam said. That almost got a smile. Not quite. The waitress came. Scarlett ordered black coffee. Liam already had his. My mother called me, Scarlett said, about a week ago, it's been a while since she called. She stopped, rearranged something in her expression. She told me about the roof. She told me about the trunk. A pause. She told me about Victor Hale. Did she tell you she almost signed his contract? She mentioned he'd made an offer. It wasn't just an offer, Liam said. There was a clause in there that would have given his company claim to everything inside the house. Contents included. She didn't read it closely. Scarlett was very still. You read it. I read it. Why? It was a direct question, and he respected it for being direct. Because she was going to sign it, he said. Because someone needed to. Scarlett looked at him for a long moment. She was trying to figure out what he wanted. He could tell what his angle was. It was a reasonable thing to be trying to figure out, and he didn't hold it against her. In his experience, people who had money, especially people who'd worked very hard to get money, developed a particular reflex about other people's generosity. They didn't distrust it exactly. They just needed to understand the mechanism. My mother said you haven't charged her anything, Scarlett said. That's right. Why not? Because she can't pay. That's not a reason most contractors give for free labor. I'm not most contractors. She picked up her coffee, drank, set it down. Outside on Merchant Street, a delivery truck pulled up in front of the hardware store, and two men began unloading things with the cheerful efficiency of people who had done this particular task 800 times. The trunk, Scarlett said. I haven't opened it, Liam said, except the lid. I saw what was in there and I put it back down. But you saw the envelope. Your name was on it, your maiden name. She looked out the window. Something shifted in her face. Something that wasn't about business anymore, wasn't about contracts or property values or what Liam Carter's angle was. Something older than all of that. My father died 4 years ago, she said. Heart attack. He was 67. He was a complicated man. We were close when I was young, and then I left for college, and I built something, and I got very busy, and she stopped, pressed her lips together. The distance between us was mostly my fault. I know that. Liam didn't say anything. He'd learned a long time ago that the most useful thing you could do when someone was telling you something true was to stay quiet and let them finish. He never said he was angry, Scarlett continued. That was his way. He just got very quiet, and you knew the distance had grown, but nobody named it, and then he was gone and… She picked up the coffee again, put it down without drinking. I don't know what's in that trunk. My mother says she never looked inside it. She says he told her to leave it, that it would matter someday. She believes him. My mother believed everything my father ever told her, said without bitterness, just as a statement of fact. Even when she probably shouldn't have. Liam turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. What do you want to do? I want to go through it, properly, with someone who can tell me what I'm looking at legally. She looked at him. I'd like you to be there. He raised an eyebrow. I'm a roofer. You're the one who found it, and you're the one who… My mother trusts you. She said it plainly, without any particular emotion attached. That doesn't happen quickly with her. She doesn't trust people quickly. Neither do you. Another almost smile. No, she said. Neither do I. They sat with that for a moment. I'll be there, Liam said. Evelyn opened the door before Scarlett finished knocking. Liam was standing 2 steps back, and he was glad of it. This was not something he needed to be in the middle of. He watched Evelyn look at her daughter, at this woman she hadn't properly spoken to in years, and he watched something move across Evelyn's face that was not quite joy and not quite grief, but was somehow both of them folded together. Scarlett stood very straight in the doorway. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with happiness. Hi, Mom, she said. Evelyn reached out and took her daughter's hand, just held it, standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, in a very quiet voice, You look tired. I drove up this morning. You should have flown. I needed the drive. Evelyn stepped back and let her in. Liam followed. They went up to the attic together. Liam, Scarlett, and a woman named Patricia Osei, who was the real estate attorney from Millfield that Liam had mentioned to Evelyn 2 weeks earlier. Patricia was 50, brisk, wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and had the particular energy of someone who had seen enough human foolishness to be past surprise, but not past interest. Evelyn stayed downstairs. She'd been clear about that. It's yours to look at, she'd told Scarlett that morning, while they sat at the kitchen table not quite meeting each other's eyes over cups of tea. Your father meant it for you. I've known that for years. I just didn't... She'd stopped. I didn't know how to start the conversation. You could have just called me, Scarlett said. The silence that followed that sentence had roughly 40 years of complicated history packed inside it, and nobody was going to unpack all of it in a kitchen on a Thursday morning. Liam had found something to do in another room until the silence resolved itself. In the attic, Scarlett crouched in front of the trunk, the way you crouch in front of something you're not entirely sure about. Cautious. Like it might surprise you. She opened it. The envelope was right where Liam had left it. She picked it up, turned it over, looked at her name in her father's handwriting for a long moment. That particular stillness of someone reading something that isn't even words yet, just the shape of the letters that a person you loved used to make. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she began going through the rest of the trunk slowly, with Patricia beside her making notes. There were letters, dozens of them, bound in rubber bands that had dried and cracked. Legal documents, some of them very old, some more recent, photographs and envelopes. And near the bottom, underneath everything else, a leather portfolio that was new enough to have been placed there within the last 10 years. Dark brown, with a brass zipper, the kind of thing you'd use to carry documents you needed to protect. Patricia took the portfolio and opened it on the attic floor. She went quiet. Scarlett, she said. Something in Patricia's voice made both Liam and Scarlett look at her immediately. Patricia was reading through the documents carefully, turning pages, her reading glasses now up on her face where they belonged. She read for almost 2 full minutes without speaking, which felt longer than it was. What is it? Scarlett said. Patricia looked up. These are trust documents. A private trust. Established in your father's name 7 years ago, 2 years before he died. She turned a page. It's valid. Properly executed, notarized, filed through a firm in She checked. Hale County, which is about 40 miles from here. What's in the trust? Scarlett asked. Patricia read a little further, and then she did something Liam had not expected from her, which was that she removed her glasses from her face and set them slowly on her knee and simply looked at Scarlett for a moment. One asset, Patricia said. A 2006 Bugatti Veyron. She paused. Registered in your father's name, stored at a private facility. The trust documentation estimates its value at, she turned the page back, approximately $3.2 million at time of filing. Current market value would be assessed separately. The attic was silent. Liam heard the crow outside. He was becoming genuinely convinced it was the same crow. It had that quality. My father, Scarlett said slowly, did not have $3 million. The trust suggests the vehicle was acquired through a private sale roughly 15 years ago. There's a bill of sale here, original documentation, registration. Patricia turned pages carefully. It's all here. Everything. She looked up again. He kept it very quiet, apparently. Scarlett sat back on the attic floor. She didn't look like a billionaire businesswoman in that moment. She looked like a 30-year-old woman who had just found out her father had been carrying a secret for 15 years, and she was trying to figure out how that fit into the version of him she thought she knew. Where is it? She said. The car. Where's it been? Patricia checked the documents. A private storage and climate-controlled facility in Millfield. The trust has been paying the storage fees annually, drawn from a small designated account. She paused. The fees are current. He set it up to run itself, Scarlett said quietly. Yes. For how long? There's no end date on the storage agreement. Patricia hesitated. Because the trust has a condition, a transfer condition. The car doesn't go to an heir automatically. It goes to, she read carefully, to the individual who fulfills the criteria specified in Schedule A. Scarlett looked at her. What criteria? Patricia found Schedule A and read it in full, aloud, in the quiet attic, with Liam Carter sitting 3 feet away, not quite breathing. The criteria were specific. The recipient had to have provided substantial assistance to the Harper family property, defined as physical labor or material contribution toward repair or maintenance. They had to have done so without financial compensation, without prior knowledge of the trust or its contents, and without any identifiable personal motivation beyond the act of helping itself. Patricia looked up. Both she and Scarlett looked at Liam. Liam looked back at them. He didn't say anything for a moment. The dust moved in the thin attic light. No, he said. Liam, Scarlett started. No, I mean, he stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I'm saying that because it can't be that straightforward. There has to be something wrong with it, or something missing, or... The documents are complete, Patricia said, and from what I can see prima facie, you meet every criteria that's stated here. Liam stood up. He walked to the gable vent and stood there looking out through it at the gray November sky, which was doing nothing helpful. I didn't know this existed, he said. That's one of the criteria, Patricia said, not unkindly. I fixed her roof. That's what I did. I know. I fixed it because she needed it fixed. I know that too. He turned around. Scarlett was watching him with that same measuring look she'd had in the coffee shop. But there was something different in it now. Something that wasn't suspicion anymore, something that looked a lot more like the beginning of understanding. Nobody does things like this, he said to her, to both of them. I mean, your father built this around someone who would just show up and fix an old woman's roof and not want anything for it. Do you know how... He stopped, laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. That's either a very optimistic plan or a very long bet. My father, Scarlett said carefully, was a very patient man. They didn't tell Evelyn that day. Not all of it. Patricia needed to do a full legal review. Scarlett needed time. And Liam needed to sit with it in a way that was impossible in someone else's attic on a Thursday afternoon. He drove home. He sat in his driveway for 10 minutes without getting out of the truck. He looked at his house, the small blue ranch house he rented for $1,100 a month, the gutters he'd been meaning to clean since September, the porch light that flickered and needed a new fixture, and he tried to square what he'd just been told with the reality of the life sitting right in front of him. $3.2 million. A car that cost more than everything he'd ever earned in his entire working life, several times over. Sitting in a storage unit in Millfield because an old man in Cedar Ridge had decided years ago that someday somebody would show up and do the right thing for the right reasons. It didn't feel real. He went inside and started making dinner. He told Noah that night. He didn't plan to. But Noah came in from school dropping his backpack on the kitchen floor with the territorial confidence of someone who believes the kitchen belongs to them, looked at his father's face and said, with the devastating directness of a 13-year-old, "What happened to you?" Liam turned the heat down under the pasta and told him. Noah listened. He was a good listener when something actually interested him. Still, focused, without the fidgeting he did when he was bored. He sat at the kitchen table with his elbows on the surface, which Liam normally told him not to do, and listened to the whole thing. When Liam finished, there was a moment of quiet. "So," Noah said, "you might own a Bugatti." "Maybe. Patricia has to finish reviewing everything. The same ones that cost like $2 million? 3.2, apparently. Noah stared at him. "Dad?" "I know. That's insane." "I know that too." Noah was quiet again, thinking. Liam could see him working through the implications the way teenagers do, with a kind of rapid-fire practicality that adults lose when they start overthinking everything. "You could sell it," Noah said. "Yeah. We could get a house, an actual house, not a rental." "Yeah, we could. And you could Noah stopped, his brow furrowed. "You'd still fix things, though, right? You'd still do the work." Liam looked at him. "Yeah," he said. I'd still do the work. Noah looked relieved in a way that surprised Liam, and then looked embarrassed at being visibly relieved, which was very Noah. Okay, he said. Good. A pause. Marcus's dad is going to lose his mind. Liam almost laughed. We don't know anything for certain yet. But if it's true, then yeah, Marcus's dad is probably going to have some thoughts. 3 days later, Patricia called. She'd completed her review. She'd brought in a colleague who specialized in estate law to look at the trust documents independently. Both assessments were the same. The trust was valid. The criteria were unambiguous. The documentation was thorough enough to withstand legal challenge. She also told Liam that Victor Hale had been making calls. He'd found out about the trunk. Liam didn't know how, and that bothered him. And he'd apparently been asking questions around town about whether the Harper estate had undisclosed assets, which was the kind of question that, coming from Victor Hale, meant he was already thinking about how to stake a claim. Does he have grounds? Liam asked. Not yet, Patricia said, but he's looking for them. If he can establish that Evelyn failed to disclose the trust as part of any property sale negotiation, or if he can argue that you had prior knowledge of the trust's existence before you started the work. I didn't. I know that, but he'll try to argue otherwise. That's how he operates. She paused. You should expect him to get louder before this is over. Liam thought about the contract, the clause about claiming assets discovered after sale, the fact that Victor had already been to Evelyn's house twice, already been quietly investigating the property's history, the fact that if Evelyn had signed that contract, if Liam hadn't read it and flagged it, Victor Hale would already own everything in that attic, including the trunk, including the portfolio, including the transfer documents for a $3 million car. He didn't say any of that to Patricia. She'd already figured it out. What do we do? He said. You come to my office tomorrow. You bring every piece of documentation you have, work records, supply receipts, anything that shows when you started work and what you spent on materials. Testimony from anyone who saw you working. I need to build the strongest possible record of your eligibility before Victor finds a way to cloud it. Okay. And Liam? Yeah. Don't talk to Victor Hale, not in person, not on the phone. If he approaches you, you tell him to contact me. Victor Hale approached him the next morning. Liam was loading supplies into his truck outside Pete Vasquez's hardware store when a black SUV pulled up to the curb and Victor Hale got out of it with the casual authority of a man who doesn't check to see if the road is clear before crossing because he's decided the road belongs to him. He was wearing a dark wool coat and a smile that had been professionally maintained for decades. Liam Carter, he said, like they were old friends, like this was a pleasant coincidence. Liam kept loading supplies. I think we should have a conversation, Victor said. I've got a full day, Liam said. This won't take long. Victor moved around to the side of the truck, positioning himself so that Liam would have to look at him or deliberately look away. It was a smooth move, the kind you don't notice if you haven't seen it before. I know about the trunk. Liam set down the box he was holding, looked at Victor directly. Okay, he said. I know about the trust. And I know about the car. Victor kept the smile in place, relaxed, reasonable. Here's the thing, Liam. I don't want this to get ugly. I genuinely don't. But there are questions about the circumstances of how that trunk was found, about what you knew and when you knew it, about whether someone was working with the Harper family on, let's say, a prearranged basis. You're accusing me of something, Liam said. I'm suggesting there might be ambiguities. Those aren't the same thing. Victor spread his hands in a gesture of openness. Look, you're a working man. You've got a kid. I respect what you did for Evelyn, genuinely. But a $3 million asset? That kind of thing requires legal clarity. And legal clarity requires a small pause. Investigation. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you an alternative. Victor reached into his coat pocket and produced an envelope. He held it out to Liam. There's a number in there. Significant number. You step back from the trust claim, let the asset pass through proper estate channels, and everyone walks away comfortable. Liam looked at the envelope. He didn't take it. Does Evelyn know you're doing this? He said. Evelyn is an elderly woman who needs to be protected from the complications of, does she know? Victor's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. A small adjustment. I'm trying to make this simple for everyone. You're trying to steal a car that belongs to a dead man's estate, Liam said, by making me an offer to walk away so you can claim it yourself. That's what you're doing. The smile went away. Be careful, Victor said. His voice was still controlled, but the warmth was gone. Be very careful, son. Don't call me son. Liam picked up the box and put it in the truck. And call Patricia Osei at Osei Law in Millfield if you have anything else to say. That's her number. He produced one of Patricia's cards from his shirt pocket and held it out without looking at Victor. Have a nice morning. He got in the truck and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. His hands were completely steady on the wheel. He was slightly surprised by that. Scarlett heard about it by that evening. Cedar Ridge was small enough that Victor, approaching Liam in the hardware store parking lot, became a known event before noon. She called Liam at 6, and this time her voice was different. The precision was still there, but underneath it something else. Something that sounded a lot like anger that had been carefully managed into a lower register. He offered you money, she said. He tried. What did you say? I told him to call Patricia. A pause. That's it? That's all you said? I also told him not to call me son. She laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, surprised out of her rather than offered. The kind of laugh that's honest because it wasn't planned. Then she got serious again. He's going to escalate. He doesn't take rejection quietly. I've dealt with men like him in business. When a soft approach doesn't work, they switch to pressure. What kind of pressure? Whatever he thinks will work. Reputation, rumors. He'll try to make it look like you had prior knowledge, like you were scheming. I fixed an old woman's roof, Liam said. In the rain. I know, Scarlett said. And there are people who were there who watched you do it. That matters. She paused. Noah was with you some of those Saturdays. Most of them. Evelyn was there. Mrs. Dutton came by with a casserole. The hardware store guy, Pete Vasquez. Did they see you? Will they talk? Yeah, Liam said. They'll talk. The line was quiet for a moment. My father's letter, Scarlett said. You opened it. Yes. A long pause. He knew someone would come eventually. He wrote that he'd built the trust believing that the right person would show up when the house needed it. He said he'd watched enough of his life go by to know that there are people who help because it's who they are, and you can't fake that under pressure. Her voice was very quiet now. He said he was sorry he wasn't around to see it. Liam was sitting at his kitchen table in the dark. He'd forgotten to turn the lights on. Through the window, the first few winter stars were showing up in the slate-colored sky. He sounds like someone worth knowing, he said. He was, Scarlett said. He really was. They were quiet on the phone together for a moment, two people on either side of a situation that neither of them had planned for, in a small town where the stakes had gotten much larger than a leaking roof. I'm coming back tomorrow, Scarlett said. I'm bringing our attorneys. Patricia should be involved. And your mother? I'll talk to her tonight. A pause. It's been a long time since we've talked properly. She stopped. Chose a different way through. We're working on it. Yeah, Liam said. Those things take time. He turned on the kitchen light finally. The room came into focus around him. The dishes he hadn't washed, the homework Noah had left on the table, the grocery list on the fridge that still said milk, bread, eggs, coffee, because nothing about their life had changed yet. Or maybe it had. He just hadn't caught up to it. He thought about Thomas Harper, a man he'd never met, who had died 4 years ago, who had stored a fortune in a climate-controlled facility in Millfield and written a trust document that read like a bet on the existence of a particular kind of person. The kind who fixed things because things needed fixing, not for what they'd get out of it, just because. He wondered if Thomas had doubted it sometimes. On the days when the storage fees came due and nobody had shown up. On the days when the world looked especially hard and self-interested and the bet felt naive. He must have stayed with it anyway. That was the thing. He'd stayed with it right to the end. Liam turned off the kitchen light again, went to the window, and stood there for a while in the dark, looking out at the cold sky above Cedar Ridge. The meeting at Patricia Osie's office in Millfield happened on a Monday morning, in a conference room that smelled like old paper and fresh coffee and the particular kind of serious business that made people sit up straighter without being told to. Patricia had pulled the long table's chairs into a configuration that was less adversarial than a standard legal meeting. Not a courtroom arrangement, not opposing sides facing each other across a battlefield of documents. More like people gathered around a problem together, which Liam appreciated because he'd spent enough time in rooms where the furniture itself was trying to intimidate him. Scarlett arrived with 2 attorneys from her firm in New York, a man named Douglas Frey, who was senior, silver-haired, and had the quiet confidence of someone who had argued in front of judges for 30 years, and a younger woman named Aisha Tran, who said almost nothing the entire morning but took notes with a speed and precision that suggested she was recording everything, including the silences. Scarlett had driven up herself again. No driver, no assistant, just her and a leather briefcase and the same dark coat. Liam came alone. He'd thought about bringing Noah and decided against it. Some things a 13-year-old didn't need to be sitting in the middle of. Evelyn was not there. Scarlett had spoken to her the night before. A long conversation, by Scarlett's account, the kind that covers a lot of ground that has been deliberately avoided for years. And Evelyn had said that she trusted the people in that room to handle it correctly, and that she was going to stay home and work in the garden for as long as the cold allowed. Which was her way of saying that this particular battle was not hers to fight, and she was going to occupy herself with something useful while it got fought. Patricia spread the trust documents across the table and walked everyone through them methodically. Douglas Frey read each page with the careful attention of someone who is looking specifically for problems, which was exactly what Liam needed him to do. Aisha wrote things down. Scarlett sat with her hands flat on the table in front of her, a stillness that looked controlled but wasn't entirely. When Patricia finished her walkthrough, Douglas leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "The trust is clean," he said. "I can find one arguable ambiguity in the language of Schedule A. The phrase 'without identifiable personal motivation' is broad enough that someone with a creative legal team could try to redefine it. But the intent is clear, the execution is sound, and the documentation of Thomas Harper's ownership of the vehicle is complete." He brought his eyes back down. "What we need is an ironclad evidentiary record of Mr. Carter's eligibility, specifically, proof that he had no prior knowledge of the trust." "I didn't know it existed," Liam said. "I believe you," Douglas said. "A judge needs to believe you too, which means we document everything. When you first came to the property, what brought you there, what you charged, which was nothing, and critically, the timeline. When you started work relative to when the trunk was found." "I found it on my 3rd visit," Liam said, 3 weeks in." "Do you have receipts for the materials? Anything time-stamped?" "Everything. I keep records. Pete Vasquez at the hardware store will have the purchase dates on file." Patricia nodded. "I've already called Pete. He's pulling the receipts." Douglas looked at Liam steadily. "Victor Hale is going to argue that you were tipped off, that someone told you about the trust before you started working, that the whole thing was a setup." "By who?" Liam said. "Evelyn didn't know what was in the trunk. Scarlett didn't know the trust existed. I didn't know Thomas Harper personally. I barely knew Evelyn. She was my mother's neighbor." "He doesn't need the argument to be true," Aisha Tran said, without looking up from her notes. "He just needs it to create enough doubt to slow down the legal process. If he can get a judge to order a full investigation into the circumstances of the trust, it ties everything up for months, maybe a year." "And while it's tied up," Scarlett said, "the storage fees on the car keep running, the estate stays in limbo, and he has time to find other angles." The room was quiet for a moment. "He's already started," Patricia said. She opened a folder and slid a document across the table. "This was filed with the county clerk's office Friday afternoon. Victor Hale's attorneys have submitted a formal challenge to the trust's validity, citing, and I'm paraphrasing, irregular circumstances surrounding the discovery of the trust documents and questions about the integrity of the transfer criteria." Liam looked at the document without picking it up. "He moves fast," he said. He's been planning this for a while, Scarlett said. He knew about the property. He knew my mother was vulnerable. He probably suspected there were assets he hadn't identified yet, which is why that clause about contents was in his purchase contract. She paused. He didn't know specifically about the trust, but he knew there was something. How did he find out about it once you started looking into it? Liam asked. Scarlett's expression shifted slightly. Cedar Ridge is a small town, she said, which wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it. Douglas folded his hands on the table. Here's where we are. The challenge gives us approximately 6 weeks before the first hearing. In that time, we need to build an affirmative record, testimony, documentation, receipts, a clear timeline that makes Liam's eligibility obvious and Victor's challenge look like what it is, which is an opportunistic legal maneuver by a man who is trying to buy a property at below market value and steal its contents. He looked around the table. Is there anyone who might testify against us? Anyone who might support Victor's version of events? Liam thought about it. He thought about Danny Briggs at Heller's. He thought about Marcus's dad and his opinion about Liam's business sense. He thought about the half-dozen people who'd rolled their eyes when they heard he was fixing Evelyn's roof for free. There are people who think I'm bad at business, he said. I don't think that's the same as people who'd lie about what happened. What about your personal life? Aisha asked, still writing. Anything Victor could use to paint you as someone with financial desperation? Someone who might have reason to scheme? It was a blunt question, and it landed bluntly. I'm behind on my truck payment, Liam said, by about 6 weeks. Aisha wrote that down. My ex-wife left 9 years ago. I've been raising my son alone. I don't have savings worth mentioning. He kept his voice level. I'm not ashamed of any of it. It's just the situation. Victor will try to use it, Douglas said. Not because it proves anything, but because it creates an image. Man in financial trouble conveniently discovers a multi-million-dollar asset. It's not evidence. It's narrative. So we counter the narrative, Patricia said. We counter it with everything, Douglas said, which starts today. The narrative, it turned out, was already running. By Tuesday, someone had talked to the Cedar Ridge Courier, the small local paper that came out twice weekly and was mostly concerned with school board meetings, high school sports, and the occasional property dispute. And by Wednesday morning, there was a brief item on the paper's website under the headline, Questions Raised Over Harper Estate Discovery. The item was short and carefully worded. It didn't accuse anyone directly. It mentioned that a local contractor had reportedly discovered significant assets on a property he was working, that the circumstances of the discovery were under legal review, and that Cedar Ridge developer Victor Hale had filed documents with the county clerk. Liam read it at his kitchen table before Noah woke up. He read it twice. Then he put his phone down and drank his coffee. Noah came in at 7:15, still half asleep, hair going in 4 directions, wearing a hoodie that had a small hole in the sleeve he'd been picking at for months. Did you see the thing on the Courier? He said. Yeah. Is it bad? Liam considered his answer. It's not good, he said, but it's not as bad as it could be. Noah poured himself a glass of orange juice and stood at the counter drinking it, thinking. What's Marcus's dad saying? I haven't checked. He definitely has opinions. He always has opinions. Noah put the glass down. So what do we do? We go to work, Liam said. I've got Dalton's property today. You've got school. We do what we do. That's it? That's it. Patricia and Douglas handle the legal stuff. I handle the work. He stood up and put his coffee mug in the sink. The best thing I can do right now is be exactly who I always was, which is a guy who shows up and does the job. Noah thought about that. Marcus's dad is definitely going to say something now. Then Marcus's dad is going to say something, Liam said. Get your backpack. What? Dalton's rental property was a duplex on the west side of Cedar Ridge that had been slowly accumulating problems for about 4 years. Dalton Reeves was a decent enough man who owned 3 rental properties and managed them the way people manage things they feel guilty about neglecting, with occasional bursts of panicked attention separated by long stretches of deliberate not looking. Liam arrived at 8, unlocked the unit, and went to work. It was the kind of day he needed, concrete, physical, clear in its requirements. The plumbing under the left unit's kitchen sink was corroded through and needed full replacement. The bathroom fan in the right unit wasn't vented to the outside. It was pushing humid air into the wall cavity, which was how walls grew black mold and how landlords ended up in court. The back steps had a soft tread that needed replacing before someone put a foot through it. He worked straight through until 2, alone, radio on low, methodical. The kind of work that uses your hands and your problem solving but leaves enough of your mind free to think, or, if you needed it, not to think. He needed it both ways that day. He thought about Thomas Harper putting that portfolio at the bottom of the trunk, what it must have taken to hold a belief that quietly for that long, to keep paying storage fees for a car in Millfield on the faith that eventually a specific kind of person would walk through Evelyn's door. He thought about Scarlett's face when she opened the envelope in the attic, the way she'd pressed her lips together, the way she'd held the letter for a long time before she said anything. He thought about Victor Hale offering him the envelope in the hardware store parking lot, the smooth reasonableness of it. Everyone walks away comfortable, as though comfort was the measure of whether something was right. By 3 o'clock, he'd replaced the sink plumbing and the porch tread and written up a detailed scope for the bathroom ventilation work. He called Dalton and left a message. He cleaned up, loaded his truck, and sat in the cab for a moment. His phone had been ringing periodically all day. He'd let most of it go to voicemail. Now he looked at the missed calls, 3 from numbers he didn't recognize. 1 from Rita at Heller's, 1 from Pete Vasquez. He called Pete first. "The receipts are all pulled," Pete said without preamble. "I've got everything from your first supply run right through the last one. Dates, items, amounts. Patricia's got copies already." A pause. "Liam." "Yeah." "Victor Hale came in here this morning." Liam went still. "Came in here personally?" "Walked in, bought a box of screws he definitely didn't need, and stood around the counter talking to me for 20 minutes about how complicated real estate law was, and how sad it was when people got caught up in situations they didn't fully understand." Pete's voice was dry as sand. "I told him I thought the situation seemed pretty understandable to me." "What did he say?" "He said he hoped I hadn't been misled about the timeline, and that sometimes people who seemed honest had motives they kept private." A pause. "I told him you'd been coming into this store for 12 years, and I'd never once seen you act in a way that wasn't straight." Liam closed his eyes briefly. "Thanks, Pete." "Don't thank me. I'm just saying what I saw." Another pause. "He's working the town, Liam. He's talking to people. Anyone who might have an opinion. I know. Danny Briggs is going to be a problem. He's been running his mouth at the diner." "What's he saying?" "That it's suspicious. That nobody fixes roofs for free. That there must have been something going on between you and the Harper family before all this." Pete's voice tightened slightly. "Which is ridiculous, and I told him so." "Let him talk," Liam said. "You sure about that?" "People who know me know the truth. People who don't know me, nothing I say is going to change their minds. Victor knows that. That's why he's using Danny instead of making the accusations himself." Pete was quiet for a moment. "You're handling this better than I would." "I'm handling it the same way I handle everything," Liam said. "I'm just trying not to fall apart before it's over." Rita's message was shorter. She'd left it in her particular tone, direct, no nonsense, but with a warmth underneath it that she'd never have admitted to in person. "Liam, it's Rita. I want you to know that I told anyone who brought this up in here today that I watched you work on Evelyn's house 3 Saturdays in a row, and you never said a word about getting anything for it. You didn't even let her pay for your coffee. I'll say that to whoever needs to hear it. Call me if I can help." He sat with that message for a minute before deleting it. Scarlett called him that evening at 7. She'd been in meetings all day. Her New York office was dealing with a quarterly review that she was managing remotely, in parallel with the Cedar Ridge situation, because her life had not conveniently paused to accommodate a family crisis in a small Connecticut town. "Victor filed supplemental documents this afternoon," she said. "He's claiming that my mother told him, during one of his visits to the house, that she'd mentioned the trunk to quote-unquote interested parties before Liam started work." Liam sat down. "That's not true," he said. "I know it's not true. My mother says she never told him anything about the trunk. She barely mentioned it to me." Scarlett's voice was controlled, but the edges were sharp. He's fabricating a witness account from an 81-year-old woman who lives alone. Can he do that? He can claim it. We can dispute it. It becomes one person's word against another's, which is exactly what he wants. Not to win, just to muddy everything. A pause. Douglas is filing a response tomorrow, but Liam, he's going to try to get to my mother directly. He's going to try to get her to say something, or sign something, or at minimum be confused enough that her testimony is inconsistent. The thought of Victor Hale sitting across from Evelyn Harper with a set of documents and that polished smile made something cold move through Liam's chest. She shouldn't be alone right now, he said. I know. I'm going back up to Cedar Ridge tomorrow. I'm going to stay for a while. How long? As long as it takes. She said it like a decision she'd already made and come to terms with. My mother is 81 and she's been alone in that house for 6 years. I should have come back a long time ago. A beat. I didn't, and here we are. Liam didn't say anything. It wasn't his place to. I'll need a key to the house, Scarlett said, and I want to talk to the people you mentioned, Pete, Rita, whoever else was around when you were working. I want to hear what they remember. I can set that up. Good. She paused. How are you doing with all of this? Honestly. The question surprised him slightly, not because it was unusual, but because of when it came. At the end of a call that had been entirely tactical, strategic, problem-focused. The question was something different, something human, wedged in at the end. I'm okay, he said. Then, I'm anxious. I don't love having my name in the paper. I don't love that my son's reading about it. He stopped. I keep thinking about what happens if Victor finds a way to make this work, if it goes his way somehow. What that means for Evelyn, for the trunk and everything in it. It won't go his way, Scarlett said. You sound sure of that. I deal with men like Victor Hale regularly. They're very effective at the early stages. The circling, the maneuvering, the pressure, but they depend on the other side being weak. They're not as effective once someone actually pushes back. You've been pushing back your whole career, Liam said. A pause. Something like that. Does it get easier? No, she said. You just get better at looking like it does. Scarlett arrived in Cedar Ridge on a Thursday and moved into her mother's house, into the room that had been hers growing up. Smaller than she remembered, with the same faded blue curtains that had been there when she was 16, which for reasons she couldn't entirely explain made her throat tighten when she first walked in. Evelyn had made up the bed, changed the sheets, put a glass of water on the nightstand. The small, deliberate kindnesses of a woman who had been waiting for her daughter to come home for a long time and wasn't going to make a big thing of it now that she had. They circled each other carefully those first couple of days. Not coldly. More like two people who had loved each other through a long silence and were now remembering how to occupy the same space without the silence between them. They ate breakfast together. Evelyn told Scarlett about the town, who had moved, who had died, what had changed and what hadn't. Scarlett told her mother things about her work in careful, measured portions. Not the full weight of it, which she sensed Evelyn couldn't quite hold, but enough to feel like she was letting her in. At night, sometimes, they sat in the living room together. Evelyn with her knitting, Scarlett with her laptop and the phone that never stopped needing to be checked. And the silence between them was different from before. Warmer. It had people in it. Liam came by on Saturday morning to check on the roof repairs, which were holding well, and to go over the timeline documentation with Scarlett for the legal record. He sat at the kitchen table with his receipts and his work log, a battered spiral notebook where he kept project notes, dates, material costs, and they went through it together while Evelyn sat nearby with her tea, listening. Third visit, Liam said, pointing to the entry in his notebook. November 9th. I found the trunk that morning. I came down and told Mrs. Harper immediately. Scarlett made a note. Did you tell anyone else that day? I called Noah when I got home. My son. No one else? No, I was waiting to see what Mrs. Harper wanted to do with it. Evelyn spoke without looking up from her tea. He came down from that attic and his face was... I knew immediately that something was different. He didn't pry. He just told me what he'd found and asked what I wanted to do. She paused. A lot of people would have opened that envelope. I thought about it, Liam said honestly. But you didn't. It wasn't mine to open. Evelyn set her cup down and looked at him with those pale gray eyes. Thomas would have liked you, she said. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. Scarlett was looking at her notes, or pretending to. Her jaw was tight. I wish I'd met him, Liam said. He wasn't easy to know, Evelyn said. He was private. He kept things inside. But when he gave you his trust, she stopped, smoothed a small wrinkle in the tablecloth with her thumb. You knew it was real, because he'd thought about it. He didn't give it lightly. Well, the first real confrontation came on a Tuesday, 9 days before the scheduled hearing. Victor Hale showed up at Evelyn's house at 11 in the morning. No appointment, no warning, just his black SUV in the driveway and him on the porch with a manila envelope and a man Liam didn't recognize standing 2 steps behind him. Scarlett answered the door. The surprise on Victor's face was brief, a flicker, quickly recovered. He'd expected Evelyn. He'd expected a frail 81-year-old woman who might be confused or persuaded or simply tired enough to want it to stop. He got Scarlett Monroe instead. Ms. Monroe, he said, recalibrating immediately. I'm glad you're here, actually. It saves time. What do you want, Mr. Hale? I'd like to speak with your mother. My mother isn't available. This concerns her property. Everything concerning my mother's property goes through her legal representation. You have those contact details. Scarlett's voice was absolutely level. Not hostile, not flustered, just clear. If you'd like to discuss the pending legal matter, you can call Douglas Frey's office. I think if your mother and I could just— She isn't available, Scarlett said again. Same tone. Exactly the same. Victor looked at her for a long moment. The manila envelope was in his hand. He seemed to consider, briefly, pushing it toward her. I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be, he said. For your family. For your mother specifically. I think you came to this house hoping to speak to a woman in her 80s who lives alone, Scarlett said. I think you were counting on her being more manageable than I am. Something shifted in Victor's face. Not anger exactly, something harder than anger, and colder. I'll be in touch with your attorneys, he said. I know you will. She closed the door. Liam was standing in the hallway, having heard the whole thing from 20 feet away. He looked at Scarlett. She had one hand pressed flat against the closed door, and her eyes were closed, and she was breathing slowly through her nose in the way that people breathe when they have just said exactly what they needed to say and are not entirely sure how their body is going to respond to it. You all right? Liam said. She opened her eyes, took her hand off the door. He's going to try something else, she said. Yeah. He doesn't quit. No, Liam paused, but neither do you. She looked at him. Something in her expression was different from anything he'd seen on her face before. Not the controlled precision, not the strategic assessment. Just a person, standing in her mother's hallway, slightly tired, slightly shaken, holding it together. My mother's in the garden, she said. We should probably go check on her. Yeah, Liam said. We should. Evelyn was exactly where she always was when the world got too heavy. On her knees in the garden, hands in the dirt, moving through a task that required enough attention to occupy her body, but left her mind somewhere else. She looked up when they came out. Was that Victor Hale's car? She asked. Yeah, Scarlett said. I thought so. She pulled a dead stem from the ground, turned it over in her fingers, set it aside. Did he have his envelope? He had an envelope. He always has an envelope. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her hands still working. Your father didn't trust him. Years ago, Victor was buying property on the south edge of town, and he came to your father with a proposal, investment partnership, something like that. Your father met him once, came home, and said he had the handshake of a man who never meant anything he said. Scarlett crouched beside her mother's garden bed, something she hadn't done since she was a child, and picked up the small hand trowel lying in the soil. Why didn't you sell before this? She asked. I know it's the house, but it's been hard, the taxes, the maintenance. You could have sold years ago and found somewhere easier. Evelyn kept working. Your father asked me not to. Scarlett was quiet. Before he died, Evelyn said, he said, "Don't sell the house until you understand what's in it." I thought he meant the furniture, the belongings. She paused. I should have gone through the trunk sooner, but I think I was afraid of what it would mean, what it would start. It started the right thing, Scarlett said. Evelyn looked at her daughter, at this woman who had built an empire and come back to kneel in the mud of her childhood garden. And something in her face softened in a way that Liam, standing back, tried not to watch too directly. Your father would be glad you're here, Evelyn said. Scarlett looked down at the trowel in her hand. I should have come back sooner, she said, for the second or third time, as though repetition might eventually dissolve the guilt of it. Yes, Evelyn said simply. You should have. A pause. But you're here now. The night before the hearing, Liam couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed at 2 a.m, listening to the particular silence of a small-town winter night, the occasional car, a dog somewhere down the block, the wind picking up under the eaves, and thought about everything that was going to happen in approximately 8 hours. He wasn't afraid of the legal process exactly. Patricia and Douglas had done everything right. The documentation was clean, the witnesses were solid. Pete and Rita and Noah and 3 neighbors who'd seen him working on Saturdays in the rain. They'd all given statements, all said the same thing, because it was the truth. What he was afraid of was more formless than that. He was afraid of what it meant to want something. He'd spent so long not wanting things, not allowing himself to think about what life might look like with financial breathing room, with stability, with the particular freedom that came from not counting every dollar twice before you spent it, that now, in the dark, with the hearing a few hours away, the wanting itself felt dangerous, like wanting it too much might somehow break the thing. He thought about Thomas Harper's letter, about the phrase Scarlett had told him. The right person would show up when the house needed it. He thought about Noah asking, "You'd still fix things, though, right?" "Yeah. I'd still do the work." He turned on his side and looked at the dark ceiling. He didn't know if he was the right person. He didn't think that was something you got to decide about yourself. He'd just done what seemed necessary, what seemed decent, not because of what he'd get out of it, but because of what happened to Evelyn if nobody did. That was all. That was the whole story, as far as he was concerned. Whether a judge agreed was another question entirely. He closed his eyes at around 3:30 and managed something that was close enough to sleep. At 6, his alarm went off. He got up, made coffee, ironed the one dress shirt he owned that didn't have a paint stain on it, and drove his old pickup truck to the county courthouse in Millfield, the same truck he'd been driving for 6 years, the one that was 6 weeks behind on its payment, the one that had a crack in the passenger side mirror he'd been meaning to fix, and a heater that worked on the driver's side but not the right. He parked in the courthouse lot and sat for a moment watching other people walk toward the building, all of them carrying something, briefcases, folders, the particular weight of whatever business had brought them here on a Wednesday morning in December. He got out of the truck. He straightened his collar. He walked in. The Millfield County Courthouse was not a dramatic building. It was functional and slightly tired, the way government buildings get when the budget for maintenance never quite catches up with the passage of time. Fluorescent lights in the hallways, carpet that had been replaced once in the last 20 years and was beginning to show it, a smell of old paper and industrial cleaning fluid that Liam associated from this point forward with the particular anxiety of having your life reviewed by strangers. He found Patricia and Douglas in the hallway outside courtroom C, both of them already deep in a quiet, rapid conversation that stopped when he walked up. Douglas was holding a coffee from the machine down the hall and looking at it with the expression of a man who had decided to drink it anyway, despite knowing better. "How are you feeling?" Patricia asked. "Fine," Liam said. She looked at him the way people look when they've learned not to push on that particular word. "Scarlett's already inside. She flew in last night. She had a board meeting in New York yesterday that she couldn't reschedule. She told me. Victor's team is here, 4 attorneys." Douglas said it without inflection, the way you say things that are meant to land. 4, Liam said. "He's bringing weight to a preliminary hearing," Douglas said, "which tells you something about how he actually feels about the strength of his position. Strong cases don't need 4 attorneys at a preliminary stage." He took a sip of the bad coffee and accepted his fate. It's theater. Expensive theater, Liam said. The most expensive kind usually is. The courtroom was smaller than Liam had expected. He'd been in one courtroom in his life. A custody mediation hearing when Noah was 4, a room so stiff with tension that he'd had trouble breathing for most of it, and he'd built up a mental image of courthouse rooms as high-ceilinged, imposing, the kind of space designed to make you feel the institutional weight of everything. Courtroom C was not that. It had the proportions of a large conference room, wood paneling that had seen better decades, and a judge's bench that was elevated just enough to be meaningful without being theatrical. Judge Renata Voss was 62, compact, with the expression of someone who had presided over enough human conflict to be past surprise but not past attention. She read the preliminary filings with her reading glasses on, and her chin slightly down, and her pen making occasional small marks on the pages in front of her, which told Liam absolutely nothing about what she was thinking. Victor Hale sat at the opposing table with his 4 attorneys arranged around him like a demonstration of resources. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Liam's truck. He looked, from the side, exactly like a man who was accustomed to winning, settled, patient, the particular comfort of someone who had decided the outcome already and was now just waiting for the process to confirm it. Liam sat next to Patricia and focused on not looking at Victor. Scarlett was in the gallery, 1 row back. She'd nodded once when Liam came in and then returned to whatever she was reading on her phone, which was her way of managing anxiety, filling every available moment with something that required her attention, so there was no room left over for the rest of it. The hearing opened with procedural matters that Liam understood approximately 40% of. Douglas handled their side with the economy of someone who had been doing this long enough that the language came out of him the way water comes out of a tap, natural, calibrated, no wasted motion. Victor's lead attorney, a man named Gerard Shaw, who had the build and bearing of a former college linebacker who had redirected all that energy into litigation, made the opening challenge with considerably more dramatic flourish. The core of Victor's argument, stripped of the legal language, was this: the trust transfer criteria were subjectively defined and therefore unenforceable as written. The phrase without identifiable personal motivation was too vague to constitute a legal standard. Furthermore, the timeline of Liam Carter's involvement with the Harper property raised questions that had not been adequately addressed. Specifically, whether Carter had been directed to the property by parties with prior knowledge of the trust. And who are these parties alleged to have directed Mr. Carter? Judge Voss asked, in a tone that suggested she was going to need that answer to be specific. Gerard Shaw said that the investigation was ongoing. Judge Voss looked at him over her reading glasses for a moment. Mr. Shaw, a preliminary challenge to a trust's validity requires more than an ongoing investigation. It requires evidence. What evidence are you presenting today? What followed was 30 minutes of careful sparring that Liam could only partially follow, but which gave him the distinct impression, from the way Douglas was sitting, that things were going reasonably well. Victor's team had documents, a lot of them, but they were heavy on argument and light on actual proof. The claim that someone had directed Liam to the property rested on a statement from a single unnamed source, which Judge Voss found insufficient. The challenge to the trust language had more substance, but Douglas had prepared for it. He presented a detailed analysis of comparable trust language in previous estate cases, 3 precedents from Connecticut and 2 from New York, all supporting the enforceability of the criteria as written. Then Gerard Shaw said something that changed the temperature of the room. Your Honor, we'd like to submit a written statement from a witness who observed Liam Carter in conversation with a member of the Harper family approximately 2 weeks before he began work on the property. This witness states that Carter was informed during that conversation that there were significant assets in the house. The room went very still. Patricia put her hand on Liam's arm under the table. He kept his face neutral. It wasn't hard because he was genuinely, completely confused. 2 weeks before, he said quietly to Patricia. I hadn't even been to the house 2 weeks before. I know, she said, equally quiet. Stay still. Douglas was on his feet. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of this witness. We haven't received this statement in discovery. It was filed this morning, Shaw said. This morning, Douglas said, with exactly the right amount of controlled disbelief. Judge Voss looked at Shaw. Why wasn't this produced in the initial discovery period? The witness only recently came forward, Your Honor. Who is the witness? A brief pause from Shaw, the kind of pause that is filled with the decision being made. Daniel Briggs, he said, a local resident of Cedar Ridge. Liam sat back slightly. Something settled in his chest that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite anger. More like recognition. Of course. Of all the people in Cedar Ridge, of course it was Danny Briggs. He thought about Danny at Heller's Diner. Nobody fixes roofs for free. There must have been something going on. The mild hostility of a man who had decided Liam was either a fool or a fraud and found the fraud theory more satisfying. He thought about whether Danny actually believed what he'd apparently told Victor's attorneys. Whether someone had offered Danny something. Whether Danny had simply convinced himself that the story he was telling was true because it confirmed what he'd always suspected. He turned slightly to look at Scarlett in the gallery. She was looking at him. Her expression was careful and still, but her eyes were asking a question. He shook his head slightly. I don't know Danny well. I don't know what he said. She understood. Petty. Judge Voss took a 20-minute recess to review the late submission. In the hallway, Douglas pulled Liam and Patricia into a corner and spoke very quietly. Briggs is claiming he saw you speaking to Evelyn Harper outside the hardware store before you started work. He says she mentioned assets in the house. That didn't happen, Liam said. I believe you, but it's his word against yours. Can we get Evelyn in here to refute it? She's prepared to give testimony, but bringing in an 81-year-old woman whose reliability Victor's team will immediately try to attack. Douglas pressed his lips together. It's not the strongest play. What about the timeline? Patricia said. Liam's first dated receipt from Pete Vasquez is November 3rd. If Briggs is claiming a conversation 2 weeks before that, that would put it in mid-October. Do we have anything showing where Liam was or what he was doing in mid-October? Liam thought. I was at Dalton's property most of mid-October, finishing up the exterior work before the weather changed. He paused. Dalton would have records. I invoiced him for the full month. Douglas pointed at Patricia. She was already on her phone. What about Briggs? Liam said. Do we know anything about his relationship with Hale? Douglas and Patricia exchanged a look. Victor Hale's development company holds the mortgage on a commercial property that Danny Briggs owns, Douglas said. A storage unit facility on Route 9. Briggs has been in arrears for, Patricia found this last week, approximately 14 months. Liam stared at him. So Victor holds leverage over him, he said. That's the charitable interpretation. The less charitable one is that Briggs is going to get something in exchange for this testimony. But can we prove that? Not today, but it's enough to argue bias, which Aisha is preparing right now. Douglas checked his watch. 15 minutes. Let's get back in there. When the hearing reconvened, Aisha Tron, who had said almost nothing in 3 weeks of meetings and had compiled more notes than anyone else in the room, stood up and made the most focused 5-minute presentation Liam had witnessed since this whole thing began. She laid out, with documentary precision, the mortgage relationship between Victor Hale's company and Danny Briggs. The 14 months of arrears. A record of a phone call between Briggs and a number registered to Victor Hale's personal phone placed 6 days ago, 3 days before the Courier article ran. The invoice records from Dalton Reeves establishing Liam's whereabouts during the period Briggs was claiming their alleged conversation occurred. She didn't accuse Danny Briggs of lying outright. She presented the information and let it sit there and be what it was. Judge Voss read through the documents Aisha submitted. She looked over her glasses at Gerard Shaw. Mr. Shaw, she said, I have significant concerns about the evidentiary weight of this witness statement given the relationship between your client and the witness and the timeline of the statement's production. She set the pages down. I'm going to continue the hearing and direct both parties to complete supplemental discovery within 14 days. I'm also directing that the written statement from Mr. Briggs be treated as provisional pending further review. She looked at the room. Are we clear? They were clear. Outside the courthouse, in the cold gray December air, Liam stood on the steps and felt the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical work, but from sustained vigilance, from spending 4 hours managing your expression and your breathing and the angle of your shoulders so that nothing escapes that isn't meant to. Scarlett came to stand beside him. She was pulling on her gloves. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired," he said, which was more honest than fine. "We did well today. The Briggs thing could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse." She looked out at the parking lot. "He'll try something else in the next 2 weeks. Yeah, we'll be ready." They stood there for a moment in the cold. Down on the street, a woman was trying to fold a stroller while simultaneously holding a coffee and negotiating with a toddler who had opinions about the situation. Ordinary Wednesday morning life, going on around the edges of everything else. "I called Evelyn from the recess," Scarlett said. "She wanted to know how it went." "What did you tell her?" "I told her it went okay, that we were handling it." She paused. "She asked if you were all right." Liam looked at the street. "Tell her I'm fine." "She'll know if I'm paraphrasing." "Tell her I'll come by this weekend," he said. "Tell her the roof is holding, and I want to check the gutters before the snow comes." Scarlett almost smiled. "You're still worrying about her gutters." "The gutters need checking," Liam said simply. She looked at him with that expression she got sometimes. Assessing, but warmer now than when he'd first seen it in the coffee shop, like she'd started looking for something in him and found it, and was still slightly surprised that she had. "Thank you," she said, for handling this with the dignity you've handled it with." She said it stiffly, like the words were a shape she wasn't entirely comfortable with, which made it more genuine than a practiced speech would have been. "My father's attorneys called me this morning. They've reviewed everything. They think the case is strong." A pause. "They said they'd never seen a trust with criteria like this actually fulfilled. They said Thomas must have been either very patient or very optimistic." "Maybe both," Liam said. "Maybe." She buttoned the top button of her coat. He was stubborn too. He didn't let go of things. Once he decided something was true, he held it. She looked up at the courthouse building. He decided a long time ago that there were still people in the world who did things for the right reasons. He held on to that. She picked up her briefcase. He was right. She walked to her car without looking back, which was a very Scarlett Monroe way of ending a conversation. Liam stood on the courthouse steps a minute longer. Then he walked to his truck and drove back to Cedar Ridge. The 14 days of supplemental discovery were not quiet. Victor Hale's team produced 3 additional witness statements, all from people Liam knew peripherally, all of them presenting versions of events that were just distorted enough from the truth to be troubling. Nothing was provably fabricated, but each statement contained small details that were wrong in ways that seemed designed to create cumulative doubt rather than make any single decisive argument. Liam read through them with Patricia on a Tuesday evening at her office and felt the particular weariness of someone who is being asked to prove a negative. He'd never talked to Danny Briggs about the Harper property. He'd never been to Evelyn's house before he started work. He'd never received any communication about the trust from anyone. These were things he knew absolutely. They were also, precisely because they were absences rather than events, harder to document than he would have liked. Douglas countered each statement methodically. Dalton's invoice records. Noah's account of the first Saturday, which Patricia had taken as a notarized statement. A record from Noah's school, a photograph from a class project, dated to the day Liam claimed he'd first driven past Evelyn's house and noticed the roof, showing Noah in school, meaning Liam's account of driving past alone lined up exactly with the timeline. Small things, each one. A mosaic rather than a single clear image. The night before the reconvened hearing, Liam's phone rang at 9:15. Unknown number. New York area code, but a different one from Scarlett's. He answered it. "Mr. Carter?" A man's voice, older, deliberate in its cadence. "My name is Harold Finch. I'm one of the attorneys for the Thomas Harper estate. We haven't spoken directly." "Mr. Finch," Liam said carefully, "I've been following the proceedings. I want you to know that the estate's position is unchanged. We believe the trust criteria have been met, and we will make that case clearly at the hearing tomorrow." A pause. But I'm calling because I want you to know something that isn't in the legal documents. Liam waited. Thomas Harper updated the trust 5 years ago. The original version was drafted 7 years before he died, as you know, but he made amendments. He added a clause that I want to read you, if you'll permit me. Go ahead, Liam said. The sound of paper. Harold Finch read, "To whoever finds this and meets these terms, I want you to know that I am not a sentimental man by nature. I built things because building was useful, not because of how it looked. But I've spent enough years watching people choose convenience over conscience that I have come to believe the reverse deserves a reward when I see it. If you are reading this through your attorneys, it means you helped my wife's home without being asked and without wanting anything for it. I am glad you exist. I am glad she found you. Take the car. Use it well." Harold Finch stopped reading. Liam sat at his kitchen table. He didn't say anything for a moment. "He wrote that 5 years ago?" he said. "Yes. 3 months before he died, as it happened, though I don't believe he knew that at the time." Liam looked at the kitchen window. His reflection looked back. 32 years old, tired, a man who fixed things for a living, sitting in a rental house at 9 in the evening. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "It won't be read into the record tomorrow," Harold Finch said. "It's not legally operative. It's attached as a personal note, not a binding codicil, but I thought you should know it existed." After he hung up, Liam sat still for a long time. Then he went to Noah's room and knocked on the door. "What?" Noah said, in the exhausted tone of a teenager who has been asleep for 20 minutes and is pretending he hasn't. Liam opened the door, sat on the edge of the bed. Noah squinted at him. "You okay?" Noah said. "Yeah." Liam looked at his hands. "I just wanted to check in." Noah sat up slightly. He had his father's dark hair and the kind of face that was going to be a good one when it finished settling into itself. Right now it was 13, bony, uncertain, real. "The hearing's tomorrow," Noah said. "Yeah. Are we going to win?" Liam thought about Thomas Harper's letter. "I am glad you exist." "I think so," he said. "I think we're going to be okay." Noah looked at him for a moment. Then, in a different tone, younger, less armored, "Dad, whatever happens, I think you did the right thing, with Mrs. Harper." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Noah lay back down and pulled the covers up. "Marcus's dad is still an idiot." "Language," Liam said. "Sorry." He sat there another minute in the dark. Then he got up, turned off the hall light, and went to bed. The reconvened hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning. At 9:45, Gerard Shaw filed an emergency motion. Liam was in the courthouse hallway when Patricia got the notification on her phone. He watched her face as she read it, and he'd learned enough about Patricia Osei in the past 3 weeks to know that the slight tightening around her eyes meant something was actually wrong, not just difficult. "What is it?" he said. "He's filed an injunction request," she said, claiming new evidence that materially affects the trust's validity. She was reading quickly. "He's saying a witness has come forward with Liam. He's claiming there's a recording." "A recording of what?" "Of you." She looked up. "He's claiming a witness recorded a conversation between you and an unidentified party in which you allegedly discussed the trunk and its contents before your first visit to the Harper property." The hallway went slightly abstract around Liam for a moment. Not the room, just the quality of his attention to it. "That recording doesn't exist," he said. "I know that. There's no conversation. There's nothing to record. I never... Liam?" Patricia put her hand on his arm. "I know, but we have 30 minutes to respond to the motion. Let me work." She was already walking. "Stay here. Don't talk to anyone." He stood in the hallway. Scarlett appeared at his elbow. She'd heard. Her face was tight. "A recording," she said. "Apparently. That's fabricated." "Obviously." "He's getting desperate," she said. "This is what desperate looks like. He wouldn't escalate this far if he thought his position was strong." She was saying it as much for herself as for him. "Douglas is on it. Patricia's on it. We have 48 witnesses, 14 dated documents, and a trust that's been vetted by 3 independent attorneys." "I know." So why do you look like that? Liam turned to her. Because there's a recording of me saying something I never said, and in about 20 minutes a judge is going to hear it, and I don't know what's on it. He kept his voice even. I have never in my life been accused of something I didn't do in a room I couldn't walk away from. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in a different tone than he'd heard from her before, I have. Twice, in business. Someone misrepresented a negotiation. Someone else forged my signature on an amendment. She looked at the courthouse wall. Both times I thought, this is the thing that ends it. Both times it didn't, because the truth was still the truth, and eventually the evidence of it was enough. She looked back at him. You did not have that conversation. That means the recording either doesn't exist or it's been manufactured. Either way, it collapses under scrutiny. Under scrutiny takes time, Liam said. Yes, she said. It does. They stood there together in the hallway of the Millfield County Courthouse on a Thursday morning in December, waiting. Douglas emerged from a side room 12 minutes later, moving quickly. He stopped in front of them. The recording exists, he said. Victor's team just provided it. I've listened to 30 seconds. Liam waited. It's a phone conversation. A man's voice, low quality, saying, and I'm quoting, there's stuff in that house worth a lot of money. I'm telling you there's something there. Douglas paused. The voice has been identified by their filing as Liam Carter. It's not me, Liam said immediately. I know that because I know you, Douglas said. But here's the thing, Aisha just ran it through an audio analysis tool on her laptop. 30 seconds, rough analysis. He took a breath. The recording was made on a cell phone. The audio quality is consistent with a recording made in the last 2 to 3 years, but there's ambient sound in the background. What kind of ambient sound? Music. Faint, but identifiable. Douglas looked at him steadily. Liam, the song playing in the background of that recording was released 18 months ago. The hallway was very quiet. And the conversation is allegedly from before I started work at Evelyn's, Liam said slowly, which was over 2 years ago. Douglas allowed himself the smallest expression of professional satisfaction. The recording was made after the conversation it's supposedly documenting. It's a fabrication, not just a misidentification. It's physically impossible for it to be what they claim it is. Scarlett let out a breath that was not quite a laugh. He overplayed it, she said. He got sloppy, Douglas said, or whoever made it for him did. He straightened his jacket. I'm going in there to take this apart. Both of you sit down, stay calm, and let me do my job. Judge Voss did not look surprised when Douglas laid it out. She looked like a woman who had waited a long time for the piece of the puzzle that made everything else make sense and had just received it. She listened. She reviewed the audio analysis documentation Aisha had expanded in the 40-minute delay. She looked at the filing timestamp on Victor's emergency motion, submitted at 9:45 in the morning, less than 24 hours after the discovery period had officially closed. Then she looked at Gerard Shaw with an expression that Liam would remember for a long time. Mr. Shaw, she said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to address the discrepancy in the recording's timeline. Shaw addressed it. He addressed it for 9 minutes, invoking technical uncertainties around audio dating and the possibility of error in the analysis. He was skilled and controlled and said nothing that was technically a lie. He also said nothing that was convincing. When he finished, the room was quiet. Judge Voss removed her glasses and set them on the bench. I'm dismissing the emergency motion, she said. The audio evidence is inadmissible. And I want to be clear that this is not a decision I take lightly. I'm referring the circumstances of this submission to the bar's oversight committee for review of potential misconduct. She looked at the documents in front of her. This hearing has been substantially delayed by a pattern of late filings, unverified witness statements, and now a piece of evidence that cannot be what it's presented as. The integrity of these proceedings has been compromised. She put her glasses back on. We will proceed with the merits of the original trust challenge. Mr. Shaw, you have the floor. Shaw had the floor for 40 minutes. He was still professional, still precise, but something had gone out of the room. The momentum, the sense that Victor's side was driving the proceedings, What remained was a legal argument that had never been particularly strong, now stripped of everything that had been propping it up. When Douglas responded, he was concise. 22 minutes. The trust language was enforceable under Connecticut estate law. The criteria had been met, demonstrably, and with clear documentation. The challenge had produced no credible evidence of prior knowledge, no credible evidence of personal motivation, and no credible alternative recipient. He sat down. Judge Voss read for a while, made notes. Then she looked up. "I'm going to take this under advisement," she said. "I'll have a ruling within 5 business days." She looked at the room. "Both parties are directed to make no public statements about the proceedings until that ruling is issued." She gathered her papers. "We're adjourned." The gavel came down. Outside was cold and sharp, the kind of December air that had teeth in it. The sky was white all the way to the horizon, the color of snow that hadn't decided to fall yet. Liam stood on the courthouse steps. Douglas was on the phone. Patricia was talking to Aisha. Scarlett was standing 10 feet away, looking out at the parking lot, her coat buttoned all the way up, one hand pressed flat against her sternum in a gesture he recognized, the gesture of someone feeling their own heartbeat to check whether it's still there. He walked over to her. She didn't say anything for a moment. Neither did he. 5 days, she said finally. Yeah. Douglas thinks it'll be sooner. He says when judges take it under advisement at the end of a hearing like this, they usually already know. That's good. It should be good. She turned to look at him. Are you okay? Actually? Liam thought about the question. He was cold. He was tired in a way that sleep wouldn't entirely fix. His truck needed its payment made, and his son had a school trip deposit due next week, and none of the practical facts of his life had changed in the 4 hours he'd been inside that building. But something else had. I'm okay, he said. And this time, it was true. Scarlett nodded. She looked back out at the parking lot. My father put something in that letter, she said. He said he imagined that whoever met the criteria would probably not feel worthy of it. He said that was almost certainly a sign that they were. Liam said nothing. I think he was right, Scarlett said. She picked up her briefcase, walked down the steps to the parking lot, got in her car without looking back, which was, as Liam had come to understand, simply how Scarlett Monroe ended things she felt too much about to let linger. He watched the car pull out. He thought about a blue Bugatti sitting in a climate-controlled storage facility in Millfield, waiting in the dark for years, patient as a held breath. He thought about Thomas Harper, whom he would never meet, who had built a trust around the specific shape of a decent human being, and waited. He thought about his old pickup truck in the parking lot with the cracked mirror and the heater that only worked on one side. He walked to it, got in, started the engine. 5 days. He drove home. The ruling came in 3 days, not 5. Patricia called at 8:17 in the morning on a Monday, while Liam was in the middle of replacing a water heater in a house on the east side of Cedar Ridge and had both hands inside a utility closet and his phone pressed between his ear and his shoulder in a way that his chiropractor would have had strong opinions about. It's done, Patricia said. He stopped moving. The judge ruled in your favor. Full validation of the trust. Victor's challenge has been dismissed with prejudice, which means he can't refile the same argument. The car transfers to you. A pause. The kind where you can hear someone smiling without seeing their face. Liam, it's yours. He stayed still in the utility closet for a moment, both hands resting on the water heater he'd been in the middle of disconnecting. The smell of old pipes and dust around him. The fluorescent light overhead buzzing faintly the way fluorescent lights always buzz, which is to say barely noticeably until the moment when everything is very quiet and then you can't stop hearing it. Okay, he said. Okay, Patricia said. That's your response? I don't know what else to say. How about anything other than okay? He laughed. It came out of him sideways, surprised. The laugh of someone who had been braced for impact for so long that the absence of it felt physically strange. Thank you, he said. Patricia, seriously, thank you. Don't thank me yet. There's paperwork. A lot of it. Her voice was warm but practical, which was the only way Patricia Osei operated. And the transfer has to be formalized through Harold Finch's office in New York. Douglas is coordinating that today. But Liam, the legal question is settled. It's over. He finished the water heater. He finished the job because the job needed finishing, and because the homeowner was a young couple with a 4-month-old baby who had been without hot water for 2 days, and because the ruling of a county court judge did not change the fact that there was a disconnected water heater in front of him. But he moved through the rest of the morning slightly differently than he'd moved through any morning in the past several weeks. Lighter, maybe. Or just less guarded. The constant low-level vigilance of someone waiting for the next bad thing had been running in the background of everything he did for so long that its absence felt almost loud. He called Noah from the truck at noon. Noah was at school and couldn't answer, so Liam left a voicemail that said simply, "Hey, we won. See you tonight." Then he called Scarlett. She answered on the second ring. "I know," she said, before he could speak. "Patricia called me too. Congratulations." "Thank you for everything you—" "Don't," she said, not unkindly. "Don't make it formal. You earned it. My father's trust worked exactly the way he intended it to. That's a good thing. That's enough." A pause on the line between Cedar Ridge and wherever Scarlett was. New York, probably. Back in her orbit, her office, the machinery of her life that had continued running while she was in a small town dealing with a problem that had started as her mother's and become, somewhere along the way, something more complicated than that. "How's your mother?" he asked. "Better," Scarlett said, and something in the word was different, fuller, somehow, than the careful, measured things she usually said. "We've been talking, actually talking." A pause. "She told me things about my father I didn't know. About the years when I was gone. He used to read the newspaper coverage of my company sometimes and cut out the articles and put them in a drawer." Her voice changed slightly. "He never told me that. He never said he was proud. He just kept the articles." Liam thought of Thomas Harper's letter. "I am glad you exist." "He didn't know how to say it," Liam said. "No, he didn't." She was quiet for a moment. "Neither did I. Neither do I, honestly." A pause that felt honest rather than calculated. "But I'm working on it." "Yeah," Liam said. "Those things take time." "You said that before." "It's still true." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Then, "What are you going to do with it? The car?" He looked out the truck window at Cedar Ridge's Main Street in December. The hardware store, Heller's Diner, the bare trees along the sidewalk, the gray sky above all of it. The place where he had grown up and stayed and built a life out of the materials that were available, which had never been particularly glamorous materials. "I don't know yet," he said. "I haven't seen it." "You haven't seen it," she repeated, like she couldn't quite believe that. "You've been fighting for it for 2 months, and you haven't—" "I didn't want to see it until I knew it was actually mine," he said. Seemed like bad luck. A silence. Then Scarlett said quietly, "Harold's office is handling the transfer paperwork today. The car can be released from the facility by end of week." A pause. "I'd like to be there, when you see it for the first time, if that's all right." "Yeah," Liam said. "I'd like that." The thing about Victor Hale was that he didn't disappear quietly. For about a week after the ruling, Liam half expected some kind of response, another motion, another filing, another angle he hadn't anticipated. Victor was not the kind of man who accepted outcomes he hadn't chosen, and the pattern of the preceding 2 months had made Liam cautious about assuming that the last move had been made. But what happened with Victor was different from another legal challenge. It was slower and in some ways more permanent. The Bar Oversight Committee's review of the emergency motion filing took 11 days. When their findings came back, they were unambiguous. The audio recording had been manufactured. Not clumsily. It had taken forensic audio analysis to confirm what the timeline had already strongly suggested, but manufactured nonetheless. The voice was a composite, assembled from recordings of Liam Carter that had been sourced from a video on the Cedar Ridge Town Council's YouTube channel, where Liam had spoken briefly at a public meeting 3 years ago about a zoning issue that affected small contractors. Gerard Shaw's law firm, which had submitted the recording as evidence, faced a formal misconduct proceeding. Shaw resigned from the firm within a week of the committee's findings, which told you everything you needed to know about how that conversation had gone internally. Victor Hale was not charged with anything, because the recording had been submitted by his legal team rather than directly by him, and because the line of plausible deniability had been maintained, barely, thinly, but maintained. This was unsatisfying in the way that a lot of real-world outcomes are unsatisfying, which is to say that the person most responsible for the worst thing did not face the most direct consequence for it. But consequences found him anyway, just through a different door. The bar committee's findings were public record. The Cedar Ridge Courier ran the story, a real story this time, not the vague insinuating item from before, but a detailed account of the hearing, the fabricated recording, and the misconduct findings. The regional paper in Millfield picked it up. A legal industry publication in Hartford ran a brief item about the bar proceeding. And in the specific insular world of real estate development, where reputation was currency and trust was infrastructure, the story traveled. Investors who had been in conversation with Victor's company about a mixed-use development project on the south side of Cedar Ridge quietly withdrew. A municipal contract he'd been expecting in a neighboring county was awarded to a different firm. Two of his company's board members resigned within the same month, citing different reasons that added up to the same reason. Liam did not take satisfaction in this in the way he'd expected to. He thought, in the weeks when Victor was at his most aggressive, that watching the man face consequences would feel good, clean, deserved. And it was deserved. He didn't question that. But what he felt when he heard about the withdrawn investors and the resigned board members was something more complicated and less satisfying than righteousness. It was more like tiredness. The tiredness of having been in something ugly for long enough that even the end of it carried the residue of the ugliness. He told Noah about it one evening, not all of it, but the general shape of it. They were in the driveway, Liam changing the oil on the truck, while Noah sat on the tailgate doing homework with the particular focus of someone who was also listening carefully. So he basically ruined himself, Noah said. Pretty much. Do you feel good about that? Liam wiped his hands on a rag. Not as good as I expected to. Noah thought about that. Why not? Because him falling apart doesn't undo the 2 months he put everyone through. Doesn't undo what he did to your grandmother. He paused, then corrected himself. Mrs. Harper wasn't Noah's grandmother, just a woman they both cared about. But Noah didn't correct him. Doesn't change the fact that he put that recording together using my voice from a town council meeting I went to because I cared about a zoning issue. That's really creepy, actually, Noah said. Yeah, it is. But he failed. His plan failed. His plan failed, Liam agreed, because you didn't do anything wrong. Because I didn't do anything wrong, and because we had good people in our corner, and because a judge did her job correctly. He closed the hood. It's not just about doing the right thing. You also need some luck and some good people around you. Don't let anyone tell you virtue is sufficient by itself. Noah absorbed this with the expression of someone filing it away for later. That's kind of a depressing lesson. The rest of the lesson is that the luck is more likely to show up when you've been doing the right thing consistently, Liam said. Pete Vasquez and Rita and the Duttons, they showed up for us because they'd watched us for years. That's not an accident. So the virtue helps create the luck. Something like that. Noah went back to his homework after a moment. Can I tell Marcus's dad he was wrong? You can tell Marcus whatever you want, Liam said, but consider whether it's worth your time. Noah thought about it for roughly 3 seconds. It is, he said. The storage facility in Millfield was a low, climate-controlled building on a commercial strip that also housed a self-storage company and a small tile warehouse. From the outside, it looked like nothing. Inside, it was kept at a precise temperature, the air slightly dry, the lighting careful, the kind of environment maintained for things that needed to be preserved. Harold Finch's office had completed the transfer paperwork on Thursday. On Saturday morning, Liam drove to Millfield in his old pickup, with Noah in the passenger seat and Scarlett following behind in her car, and they all went inside together. The facility manager was a quiet man named Robert, who had clearly learned in his line of work not to react to what he was storing or who came to collect it. He led them down a corridor of numbered units, unlocked the one at the far end, and rolled up the door. The car was under a fitted cover, deep charcoal gray, custom cut to its shape. You could see the shape of it even under the cover. The long hood, the wide, low stance, the way it occupied space differently from ordinary things. Robert peeled the cover back from the front and kept going, slowly, until the whole car was visible. Noah said something that Liam was going to pretend he hadn't heard because of the language, but which expressed the sentiment accurately. It was blue. Not the blue of ordinary things. Not sky blue or navy blue or the blue of Liam's old rental house walls. It was a blue that seemed to contain light rather than reflect it, a deep particular blue that shifted slightly depending on where you were standing, like the color was alive inside the paint. The body was low and wide and precise, every surface doing exactly what it was supposed to do and nothing more. Liam stood in front of it and looked at it for a long time without touching it. Behind him, he heard Scarlett say quietly, "My father bought this at a private auction. He drove it once, just once, on a closed track in upstate New York. He said it was the most alive he'd ever felt moving through space." A pause. "He came home and told my mother he'd found something worth holding on to." Noah was walking slowly around the car with the reverent expression of someone in the presence of something they'd only ever seen in photographs and video games. "It's real," he said, mostly to himself. "It's actually real." Liam reached out and put his hand on the hood. The metal was cool and smooth under his palm. He thought about Thomas Harper's hand on this same surface, an old man on a closed track feeling alive. He thought about a leaking roof, a wobbling ladder, sandwiches with the crust cut off. He thought about how long a line of small, ordinary decisions it had taken to get here. "You want to sit in it?" Robert said, with the neutral helpfulness of a man who had seen people have a lot of different kinds of moments in this room and had learned to facilitate without intruding. Liam opened the driver's door. He sat in it. The seat fit differently than he expected. Lower, more precise, like the car was designed to hold a person specifically rather than accommodate one generally. The steering wheel was in front of him. The gauges were dark and still. Everything was waiting. He sat there for a moment in the silence of the storage facility, then he got out. "Okay," he said. Noah stared at him. "That's it? You just sat in it?" "Yep." "You didn't even start it." "I'm not starting it in a storage facility." "Then when are you—" "I need to think about some things first," Liam said. He looked at Scarlett. She was watching him with that expression he'd come to recognize. The one that wasn't the business face, wasn't the strategic assessment, just a person, paying attention. "What things?" she asked. "About what this is for," he said. "About what it ought to do." He didn't make the decision overnight. He made it over about 2 weeks, in the incremental way that real decisions get made. Not in a single moment of clarity, but through a series of smaller recognitions that accumulated until the shape of the right thing became obvious. It started with Mrs. Dutton from the flower shop, who stopped him on Main Street one morning to say she'd heard about the ruling and was glad, and then said, almost as an afterthought, that old Gerald Prentice on Birch Street had a roof in worse shape than Evelyn's had been, and he was 78 and couldn't afford to fix it, and she didn't suppose Liam had any thoughts about that. He drove past Gerald Prentice's house on the way home. He sat in his truck outside it for a while. He thought about what it would take to do this properly. Not just him and his weekends and his reclaimed materials. Properly. Organized, funded, sustainable. The kind of operation that didn't depend on one person's willingness to work for free, but had the structure to keep going when that person was sick or busy or simply couldn't carry it alone anymore. He thought about Scarlett, who ran a global investment portfolio and had the resources to fund something like that and the organizational mind to build it. He thought about what Evelyn had said. "Let me do what I can do." He called Scarlett that evening. She picked up on the first ring this time. "I have an idea," he said. "I want to know what you think." He told her. He didn't pitch it. He wasn't a pitcher, wasn't a businessman, didn't have the language for it. He just described what he'd been thinking. A foundation, focused specifically on elderly homeowners in small towns and rural areas who were living in homes with dangerous structural problems they couldn't afford to fix. Not charity exactly, more like infrastructure. The kind of thing that meant people didn't have to choose between a leaking roof and groceries. He'd run the field operations, he said. The assessment, the project management, the actual work. He knew contractors throughout the region. He knew how to evaluate a structure, how to prioritize repairs, how to work efficiently with limited materials. He'd need someone to handle the funding side, the organizational structure, the legal and financial architecture of something that was meant to last. Scarlett was quiet for a moment when he finished. "How long have you been thinking about this?" she said. "Honestly, since about the second Saturday at Evelyn's. Before you even found the trunk." "Before I found the trunk," he confirmed. Another pause. "I've been thinking about something similar," she said. "Not this specifically, but the idea that money sitting in investment vehicles could be doing something more direct." She paused again, and he could hear her thinking, the particular quality of Scarlett Monroe's thinking, which was fast and structural and moved quickly from concept to logistics. "The car," she said. "Yeah. You're not going to sell it." "Not right away. The car should be part of the foundation, the story of it, what it represents. It should be visible. It should matter in a way beyond its market value." Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. "My father would have agreed with that," she said. "I know," Liam said. "That's partly why." They talked for another hour. By the end of the call, nothing was decided formally, but the shape of it was clear in the way that things are clear when two people who think differently happen to be thinking toward the same point. After he hung up, Liam sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote down what he remembered of the conversation. Not because he was going to reference it later. He'd always been better at remembering conversations than documents, but because writing it down made it real in a way that kept it from evaporating overnight. He wrote down, Harper Home Foundation. Then he sat back and looked at those 3 words. It felt right. It felt like something Thomas Harper would have recognized and not minded. They announced it in the spring. Not with a press release or a ribbon-cutting ceremony or any of the things that organizations do when they want attention. Scarlett had suggested a small local event, Cedar Ridge, Evelyn's front yard, the people who had been part of the story. No reporters invited, though a few showed up anyway because Cedar Ridge was small enough that word traveled through channels that didn't have an off switch. It was a Saturday in April, cold enough still for a coat, but with that particular quality of spring light that makes everything look slightly more real than it did in winter. Sharper, more present, the color turned back up. Patricia was there. Douglas and Aisha had sent a joint card. Harold Finch had driven up from New York, which surprised Liam until he thought about it and realized that Harold had been carrying Thomas Harper's trust for years and deserved to see where it landed. Pete Vasquez was there, and Rita, and Margaret Dutton, and old Gerald Prentice, whose roof Liam had assessed the previous month and whose name was first on the foundation's project list. Noah wore a button-down shirt without being asked, which was the clearest possible signal that the day felt significant to him. Evelyn wore the blue dress she saved for occasions, and Scarlett stood in the yard of the house where she had grown up, the house with the new roof that held against the winter, that hadn't leaked once since November, and spoke without notes, which was unusual for her, and said things that were shorter and more honest than the things she said in boardrooms. She said the foundation existed because of a man who had believed in a particular kind of person before he'd ever met one. She said it existed because an old woman had kept faith with her husband's instructions for 4 years without knowing why. She said it existed because a contractor named Liam Carter had climbed a ladder in November with no expectation of anything but the work. She said her father had been trying to say something with the trust that he hadn't known how to say in words. That some things were worth more than what they cost. That people who gave without counting were rarer than they should be and deserved to be recognized. That the best legacy he could imagine was not the car or the money, but the belief, demonstrated and not just stated, that decency still happened in the world. She stopped, looked at the yard full of people, looked at her mother, who was standing at the edge of the gathering with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea, exactly as she had stood in her kitchen doorway the first morning Liam arrived. "I'm going to stop talking now," Scarlett said, "before I say something I'll regret." People laughed, the real kind, surprised and warm. Then she walked to Liam and held out the Bugatti's key, not for the first time that had happened in Patricia's office with notarized documents and witnesses, but publicly, plainly, in her mother's yard, in front of the people who had watched the whole thing unfold. He took it. He looked at it in his hand for a moment. A small thing. A piece of metal that had sat in a drawer in a climate-controlled storage facility for years, waiting. "Thank you," he said, which felt insufficient and was the only true thing he could say. "Thank my father," Scarlett said. "I will," he said, "in whatever way I can." There were things that didn't resolve cleanly, because that is the nature of real endings. They don't tie off every thread. They just change which threads you're holding. Danny Briggs came to Liam 6 weeks later at the hardware store in what was clearly a prepared approach. He'd been waiting near the entrance, which meant he'd made the decision to do this, walked back from it a few times, and then done it anyway. He looked bad. Not physically. He looked fine, physically. But in the particular way that people look when they've been carrying something they should have put down sooner and the weight of it has started to show in their face. "I need to talk to you," he said. Liam looked at him for a moment. "Okay. What I said. The statement I gave. I told myself it could have been true, that I might have seen you talking to Evelyn Harper before the job started. I convinced myself I might have heard something." Danny stopped. His jaw worked. "I didn't. I made it up because Victor's people made it sound like there was something suspicious going on, and I owed Hale money, and they made it clear that—" He stopped again. "I'm not making excuses. I'm saying I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Liam stood there looking at a man who had done something bad for comprehensible reasons and was standing in front of him now because not standing there was worse. He thought about what it had felt like hearing Danny's name read out in that courtroom. The cold drop of it. He also thought about how Victor Hale had used Danny, had found a person in a difficult position and turned the difficulty into a tool. That was on Victor. The choice to be used was on Danny. Both of those things were true at the same time. "Okay," Liam said. Danny blinked. "Okay?" "You were in a bad spot and you made a bad choice," Liam said. "I'm not going to tell you it didn't matter because it did. It made everything harder for a while." He paused. "But you're here now, so—" I don't know if I could do what you're doing right now," Danny said quietly. "You don't know what you do," Liam said. "Neither do I, most of the time. You just make the call you can live with and hope it's the right one." He went inside and bought what he needed and came back out, and Danny was gone. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. Liam didn't think he was built for the kind of clean, dramatic forgiveness that made for a good story. It was more like setting it down, deciding not to carry it anymore because carrying it was a weight, and the weight didn't serve anything. He thought that was probably the best he could do, and the best he could do was enough. The foundation's first 3 projects were completed before summer. Gerald Prentice's roof, a house on the south end of town where an 84-year-old woman named Connie Walsh had been living for 2 winters with a furnace that was failing and couldn't be turned up past 62 degrees because it would trip the circuit breaker. And a structural repair on a porch in Millfield, referred by Patricia, whose practice had quietly become a pipeline for identifying exactly the kind of cases the foundation was built to address. Liam supervised all 3 himself, with 2 other contractors he'd worked with for years who had agreed to give their labor at cost for foundation projects. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't different from the work he'd always done. It was just more organized, better funded, and aimed at people who had nowhere else to turn. He still drove his pickup truck. He'd asked Patricia about the truck payment situation after the transfer was completed. With the asset now legally his financial picture had changed considerably. Not in terms of immediate cash, since the car wasn't sold, but in terms of what he could borrow against, what terms he could access, what the shape of his options looked like. He'd used a small amount to clear his debts. The truck payment, 6 weeks behind. A medical bill from when Noah had broken a finger playing basketball in January that Liam had been paying down slowly. A credit card balance that had been accruing interest for 2 years. That was all he'd done immediately. The rest he'd put into the foundation's initial operating fund and let Douglas and Scarlett build the structure around. Noah found out about the debts being paid from the bank notification on the shared account. He came to find Liam in the garage that evening. "You cleared the truck payment," he said. "Yeah," And the medical thing. Yeah. That's it? For now. Noah leaned against the garage door. He was 14 now, had turned 14 in February, quiet birthday, cake from the bakery on Main Street, a new set of art supplies he'd asked for, and a small envelope of cash from Evelyn that was still $20, which made Liam smile every time he thought about it. We're still living in the same house, Noah said. The lease is good, Liam said. I don't need to own a house right now. The Bugatti is worth $3 million. I know what it's worth. Noah was quiet for a moment. I don't understand you sometimes, he said. That's okay. No, I mean, I respect it. I just don't entirely understand it. Liam set down the wrench he'd been using. The car is the foundation symbol, he said. The story of how it came to us is the foundation story. If I sell it for cash and buy a house and a truck that doesn't have a cracked mirror, it becomes a thing that happened and then ended. He looked at his son. Right now it's a thing that's still going. The reason it exists is the reason the foundation exists. I don't want to separate those two things. Noah looked at the floor of the garage, then up at his father. Can we at least fix the mirror? He said. Liam laughed. Actually laughed, without it being surprised out of him, just the regular kind. Yeah, he said. We can fix the mirror. On the last Saturday in May, Liam drove to Evelyn Harper's house for the first time in several weeks. The foundation work had kept him busy, and Cedar Ridge had the slightly warmer, slightly busier quality it got in late spring when people started being outdoors more and noticing all the things that had deteriorated over winter. Evelyn was in the garden. She was always in the garden. But Scarlett was there too, sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee and a laptop, which she closed when she heard his truck. She was there more often now, not living in Cedar Ridge, but coming up more frequently, for longer stretches, in a way that seemed to be becoming its own kind of normal. Liam parked and walked up to the porch. You're early, Scarlett said. I wanted to check the gutters before I forgot again. The gutters are fine, she said. I had someone look at them last month. He stopped. You did? I told you I could handle some things. You didn't tell me about the gutters. Liam, the gutters are fine. He stood there for a moment, vaguely unsatisfied in the way that people who fix things are unsatisfied when there's nothing left to fix. Then he sat down on the steps beside her. Evelyn looked up from the garden. There's coffee inside, she said. In a minute, Liam said. It was warm. The sky was the kind of blue that made you stop thinking about what you were supposed to be doing next and just let itself be looked at. The roof above them was sound. He knew every board of it. He'd put his hands on each one, in the rain, on 3 November Saturdays that felt like a different life now and also felt like last week. My mother has been talking about your father, Scarlett said, not looking at him, looking at the yard. More than she used to. Is that good? I think so. She kept so much of it inside after he died. She was, you know how she is. She doesn't put it out where people can see it. A pause. She told me last week that she used to watch your father's trust like a kind of faith, that she knew it would find someone eventually, and keeping that house up and paying those storage fees was her way of holding up her end of a promise. She never told me that. She wouldn't. That's between her and Thomas. Scarlett turned to look at him. But she told me, which means something, I think, between the two of us. In the garden, Evelyn straightened her back slowly and looked at them on the porch steps, and something in her expression was the nearest thing to satisfied that Liam had ever seen on her face. Not happy exactly, which was too simple a word for what it was, but settled. Like the long, patient act of holding things together had arrived somewhere worth arriving at. Liam thought about Thomas Harper writing his letter 3 months before he died, on a Tuesday afternoon or a Sunday morning, at a desk in a house that was now a house with a sound roof and a daughter who came back. I am glad you exist. Take the car. Use it well. He thought about how a person builds something that lasts longer than themselves, not by force and not by certainty, because neither of those things survives the person, but by the particular stubbornness of choosing to believe, against all reasonable evidence, that the world contains the kind of person who will do the right thing when nobody is watching and nothing is promised. That belief doesn't make it true, but it makes more room for it to be true. It holds the door open a little longer. Maybe that was the lesson. Not that virtue always wins. It doesn't. Not cleanly, not on schedule. Not that good people don't suffer, because they do. But that when someone decides to hold the door open, to maintain a space where the right thing has somewhere to land, sometimes it lands. Sometimes it actually lands. The coffee was waiting inside. The gutters were fine. The foundation had a project starting Monday. And somewhere in Millfield, in a climate-controlled room, a blue car sat in the particular silence of something that has fulfilled its purpose and is waiting to see what comes next. Liam stood up. "I'll get that coffee," he said. He went inside.